have somebody turn the heat up a little bit, or is it just me? Is it cold in here?
Yes, sir. That's why we wore jackets.
Yeah.
We're
I'm the
pretty,
chairman.
there you go.
We're trying to get you,
You guys are terrible.
we're working on you.
Check your mic, I guess this is not.
Yeah.
How you been?
Doing well.
Jennifer's out sick today, just wanted to let you know.
Okay.
But everybody else is here.
Matt?
Oh, and Matt, yeah, but Matt told me he was coming, so he might just be late.
Okay. Yeah.
It's 9:00.
Not on my Rolex, it's not.
It's a Rolex.
You know what somebody told me? They're not timepieces, they're pieces of, art.
Jury.
Jewelry, yeah, so they don't need to keep good time. All right, good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Can you all hear me okay? Before we start, if you have a cell phone, please either mute it or turn it off. Want to rise for the invocation and the pledge, please? Our Heavenly Father, we come to you this morning, and we're thankful for another beautiful day in this paradise that we all live in. We ask you that we work together today and that we listen to everybody's opinions, but we never compromise on the mission of the TDC for our visitors and our residents. We ask this all in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, call to order the Tourist Development Council meeting on Tuesday, April the 2nd, 2019. The South Walton Annex Board. I'm going to do a quorum call here. Matt Hagan is not here yet. Mark,
Here?
Trey,
Here?
Tom Cooper,
Here.
Jennifer, I believe, is absent. Stacy Hamilton.
Here.
Tim Norris.
Here.
Jim Shirley.
Here.
Richard Feldman present. We do have a quorum. At this time, are there any public comments on the agenda items for today?
Mr. Chairman, you need, under the consider additions and deletions, you have one addition that will require a motion if it wishes to be added.
I can't hear you.
You have under consideration of additions and deletions, you need a motion on the addition under new business.
Oh, I'm sorry, I was looking at the wrong one. Thank you, Clay. Do we need a vote on that?
Yes.
Okay. Since you all were given your packets, there has been an addition under new business to discuss the Satellite Visitor Center, so we need a motion to add that to the agenda today.
So moved. Second?
Any comments from the public? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those against? Seeing none, passes. Thank you, Clay. Next item on the agenda, approval of the minutes.
Motion to approve?
Have a motion and a second. Do we need public comments on minutes, Clay?
Hey, anytime you have a motion, yes, but minutes are ministerial, so.
Okay.
Limited version of what public comment can be, yes.
Okay.
Always ask for public comment after a motion and second.
Any comments on the approval of the minutes of our last meeting? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? Seeing none? Approval of the minutes passes. We keep this up, we're gonna be out of here by 9:30. Good morning, Jason.
Good morning, sir. Good morning, council and commissioners.
We have one new member. Are you familiar with who he is?
With Mr. Shirley?
Huh?
Yes.
Okay, just want to make sure.
Yes, sir. Thank you guys for your time and your service that you provide towards the TDC. Following recap, we're going to look at December month first. This is our December financials, which includes the spend for the month and the balance. These are numbers supported in your financial report that you've got in detail. The highlighted areas is what I've used to build these slides with. December, we were 25% through the year. 10% of the budget was spent. Many of those items will catch up as the year progresses forward. In January, our financials, we were 33% through the year with 13%. The pie chart depicts 1 month spending and the percent in each department that was spent in that month. The next slide is a larger snapshot of January, the most recent month in revenue. And we have for TDT collections $3.9 million year to date. Our anticipated revenue for FY19 is $25 million. We are 15.71% towards that goal. Our TDT collection in January was $614,975. Our retail sales was $5,167. So our total November revenue was $620,142. Again, you'll see the reserves that are broken down per each percent of the TDT, with our current total at $46,357,000. TDT collection history, month over month and year over year. You'll see in December again, $672,318 was collected. That was 3.19% higher than last year's December. In January, $614,975. That was 22.67% higher than last year. That was a big jump. Year-to-date total is $3.926,615,000, which is 17.98% higher than last year. We believe, of course, this storm and the demands on that during the winter months definitely played a key part in that. February, I just emailed to you. We got those yesterday. Those numbers were in. In February, we collected $709,069. That is 13.28% higher than February of the year prior to. So far, every month has been a increase year over year for that month. And barring any questions, request approval for December and January's financial reports. Yes, sir.
Hey, Jason,
Yes, sir.
on the reserves,
Yes, sir.
I noticed in December it was $47,074,863, and then in January it dropped to $46,357.
Yes, sir. If we have a month where we operate below, like as far as our cost goes, if it operates below what we've taken in TDT-wise, then you'll see that variance come out of the reserves.
Okay.
So that's where you see that division. Yes, sir. Any other questions?
I so motion to approve the December 2018 and January 2019 financials as presented.
Second.
Hey, good morning.
Good morning.
Have a motion and a second. Any comments from the public on Jason's presentation? Seeing none, all those in favor of approval of December 2018 and January 2019 financials, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Seeing none, motion passes.
Thank you all. I've got two updates real quick. The first one is on the Maximus study. A little history behind that. That is a third-party company called Maximus. They do cost-sharing analysis studies for state, federal, other county municipalities. The very first study was done in September of 2014 at the request of past TDC leadership and the finance office. The amount of shared cost was then set up for a 3-year term to be reviewed every 3 years. So in 2017, that was a renewing year for this study. They completed the study recently, showing an increase in the annual cost, but the current difference can be absorbed through percentage of interest on the reserves and by our services we provide to the county, such as permit and ticketing services, by code enforcement and admin assistance from them. The delay in transition of the county finance director leaving, coming and going, and the time allotted for them to put the study together kind of pushed into this fiscal year. So we've been able to find those key elements that we need in order to make up the difference for the cost variance. But most importantly, when I meet with each one of you guys within the next couple of months to go over the 2020 budget, we can go over this in more detail, and I can break it out. It's about a 200-page document, so I can show you just our portions in detail on that document. But I just wanted to bring that in as an update. If you guys have any questions or anything, you can always feel free. Yes, sir.
Jason, are you saying that since the last Maximus study, we've shown an increase in cost that we paid back to the county in the amount of over $500,000?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. That increased cost comes with staffing and also with any services that we provide, or that they provide, such as HR services, legal, admin support, clerk and finance, facilities maintenance.
What would that total be now?
It's close to 1.6 million, or 1.485. I've got the exact total for you here. Hold on just one second. Let me give you the exact.
But approximately $1.5 million.
1.46, yeah.
1.4? Yeah.
Yes, sir.
You know, is there an option for us to take a look at what work we do currently at the TDC, and then what type of support we're requesting or requiring from the county, and to take a look at some self-sufficiency to reduce our costs?
Yes,
And that
absolutely.
burden on the county, and we talk about human resources, human capital. Certainly, that's something we could do internally, and I'm sure in an efficient manner at a cost savings to the county and the TDC. So I would encourage the Board of County Commissioners to allow us to work through that exercise of self-review and self-assessment to find out what efficiencies we can generate to save the county money and to save the TDC dollars.
Yes,
That would
sir.
be my recommendation.
Thank you, sir. Absolutely. We're definitely going to look more in depth into our operation to try to find that additional offset of services that we provide, in lieu, so we could help lessen our annual cost on that.
Very important.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
I think your point's well taken, but I think the county, being who they are, I don't mean that in a negative way. Right?
Here it goes.
No, to add to what you're saying, I think if we went in and demanded that the county start, reducing this amount, I think when you start demanding things, you're going to get a reaction that might be negative. And I think the way that you suggested it, I want to kind of dwell on that a little bit more and say what we probably need to do is just approach this from a real positive standpoint and saying, we're a business and we have to cut costs wherever we can. We want to work with you, county commissioners, and try to reduce some of that dependency where we could probably do some of it in-house because we have such a qualified staff here. And I think if we use that approach as opposed to
Yes,
Just
I would
walking-
not use the word demand, Mr. Chair.
Right.
I'd use the word proposed, recommended for your
Yeah.
consideration. So it's all in how we present it, right?
Yes, sir.
I think that's key because.
Very important.
Yeah.
We're a collaborative partnership.
Absolutely.
We always will be. We'll always be intertwined. We'll always work together towards the best interests of the county. And again, as a business, we're responsible to just review efficiencies and economy of scale.
Yes, sir.
I think that's our responsibility.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally agree with those comments. Jason and I have had lengthy conversations on this subject. I think Jason's already identified some areas that we can accomplish exactly what you outlined, Mark. To put it in perspective, we're managing about a $25 million annual budget. So to go, from say 4% up to 6%, that's kind of the level that we're at right now. So it's a bit of a shock to the system after, but it has been 3 years, and there's rising wages, and that's just part of the economy we live in. But I think Jason has some great ideas to kind of approach this along with Jay. Spoke to them both about this.
Yes, sir. I
And
will.
Jason,
Yes,
you did say that there will be some meetings planned in the near future?
Yes,
Kind of
ma'am,
go through this?
absolutely. Yes, as we continue on through the month of April, my next update is in the month of April, we've got our budget request from the county, and so during the month of April, we'll plan it, and then starting May 1, we'll make an appointment to meet with each of one of you separately and go over our FY20 budget at that time too. I can probably bring back some, more in-depth operation look that I've been able to do towards that cost allocation. Yes, ma'am. And the next update was, again, during the month of April, we'll plan our budget. In May, we'll meet and with the board members to cover details and questions. We will then bring that back to the June meeting, TDC meeting for approval to request. And the request will go through the budget hearing process with the county to be adopted in September.
We're probably, in my opinion, dealing with two different things, the 2020 budgeting. I'd like to go back to the Maximus study.
Yes, sir.
And suggest that we make a recommendation to you and to Jay and to staff to at least get started on this. Rather than tie it into the 2020 budget is something we're going to deal with, and this is probably going to be included with it because that number's going to hopefully decrease. But I think it's a separate subject that we need to deal as a council with as a separate line item. And sure. I think it's something that we can make a recommendation to you and Jay and staff, and starting that thing and starting the momentum and working on this thing to get, to the end where we want to be.
Sure.
So, are you okay with that, Jay? Clay?
Absolutely.
Okay. So I need, Mark, you probably said it best, so if you want to go ahead and make a motion to that effect.
That's a motion that the TDC requests from the Board of County Commissioners an opportunity for us to review our in-house organization and workload and how we might find efficiencies to benefit the county and TDC costs.
Okay.
I'll second that motion.
Any further discussion? The only comment I want to make on that, do we want to give them a recommendation to go straight to the county commissioners, or do you want them to start on that and bring it back to us?
Well, I propose we do our internal work and approach the Board of County Commissioners with what we might propose or recommend for their consideration.
All right, I think that clarifies that. All right. Any comments from the public? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you,
Fantastic.
Jason.
Thank
you,
you.
council. All right, now go ahead and go to the 2020 budget, because we had to get that out of the way
Yes, sir.
first.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Real quick, in April, we'll be drafting our budget, which is now. In May, we'll be have individual meetings with each one of the council members to go over it in detail. At that time, too, we'll recap and look at the Maximus study and what we may have found by then. In June, TDC budget approval will bring it back to the council for approval, and then in September is when it will actually be adopted by the BCC. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Nice job, Jason.
Yes,
Thank
sir.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jay.
Jay? Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, council members. Just wanted to, I'm going to introduce Lee Moore, but I just kind of wanted to just introduce this agenda item. So it is a request for a recommendation to the BCC to fund up to $500,000 for the Inlet Beach pedestrian underpass. So as many as you may know, that the county is working on a project over at 98 and 30A on the east side of 30A for a pedestrian underpass that would go in the right-of-way in front of Shades, and it would cross the street, and you can kind of see here in this illustration to the other side, on the north side of 98, over by the donut hole. And so, you know, we have challenges in Walton County with 98 being just such a heavily traffic, you know, used thoroughfare. And so it was proposed to put a tunnel here. And also, you know, I've had some conversations with some folks who say maybe when we get this one done, it might be a good idea to put one in Miramar Beach near Silver Sands. But anyway, that's a conversation for another day. But anyway, Lee Moore is going to come up in just a second and talk a little bit about this project. She's been intimately involved with it. She knows a lot more than what I do what's going on with this project. So she's going to kind of give you the lowdown of where we are with this project, the future plans for it. They are short of some funds to get this project complete. Right now, I believe if it's $2 million, and I'll let Lee correct me if I'm not correct in that figure. And so the money that we're looking to fund would help with the priority list with this project with DOT. So I think it's a worthwhile project and certainly something you guys should consider for TDT funds to be used for this project. And with that, I'll turn it over to Lee.
Morning, Lee.
Okay. Good morning. Thank you, council and chair. I appreciate the opportunity to speak.
Yeah, please state your name for the record.
Lee Moore, Leigh, Moore, Moore.
It's like you've never been here before.
I know, but we have to do it, right? So I have been involved with the project since inception. Back in 2013, a group of people came together. I've been before this body, but some of you are new since then, about other aspects of this project. A lot of people, community leaders, developers in the area, business owners, nonprofits came together back then to say, okay, all of a sudden we have all this development coming in Inlet Beach, whereas it had been very, very sleepy and slow before that. And so that intersection, even with just the donut hole going in, became the hub of the traffic, vehicular, pedestrian, cyclist traffic. And especially those developers around that intersection began to get very concerned about safety. There was also concern about aesthetics, and a lot of the other aspects of this overall initiative address aesthetics through landscaping, but safety is an even bigger component of it. So it became very clear that we needed to improve the safety of people getting across 98 on foot and on bike. And so we looked at a multitude of different scenarios, improvements that could be made to the intersection at grade, an overpass. We put a good bit of time and study into that. It was difficult to make that work because the landings had to fall outside of DOT right-of-way, and it became very long and cumbersome to use and expensive. And so then we turned to the underpass concept, which is what you're seeing before you. So this has been a long time coming. We've been working on it steady for about 5.5 years. And we were gearing up to pursue a lot of different funding sources for this because we knew it was going to be pretty expensive. Last year in 2018, we were fortunate enough to get a $2 million appropriation from the DOT budget during the legislative session in 2018, not the current one. And so at that point, it meant it became a DOT project, and they took ownership of the project. So DOT is pursuing the design and construction of the project at this point. Also back then, the Board of County Commissioners approved $225,000 in proportionate fair share funding to go toward the project. We had no idea it was going to be quite as expensive as it ended up being when it became a DOT project, but it did, so we're now looking for further funding. And I'm going to go over sort of a brief summary of the funding needed for the project.
What is the total cost?
It's going to be about a $5.5 to $6 million project in total. Yep. They're expensive. It's just a box culvert with ramps, but somehow it gets very expensive. And just to say so, to put it into a little bit of perspective, one of the most costly things about the project is maintenance of traffic because they have to keep 4 lanes of traffic open at all times during the construction. So that makes it a lot more expensive. because they have to build temporary lanes and shift those lanes as they build the actual tunnel underneath. And it also adds a lot of time to construction. If it weren't for that, they could probably construct this in about 4 or 5 months. Our guy from DOT, Kevin Fusel, is here from DOT. He's the project manager, and he's here if you have any questions more technical in nature that I can't answer. That adds a lot of cost, as you can imagine, and time. So that's just what we're dealing with, right? So currently the project is at 60% design with DOT, and they have hired Volkert to do the design. They're responsible, along with DOT, for the images you see. And I would like to give you, if it's okay, some printed images. I find it sometimes better to have it in front of me on paper. So if you can take 3 pages and then pass it on, and it'll help you get a lot better perspective. Now, these were earlier renderings that you're seeing on the screen that are animation. The ones coming around are worked up in sort of a Photoshop type environment, so they actually look like the intersection, and it's an actual photo at the base of it with some computer generated renderings added to it. So I will say this, DOT and the designers have been extremely cooperative with us and are excited about the project. They've taken a lot of suggestions from us. They're still open to more, although as it gets further along toward 100% design, of course, it gets more difficult for them to make changes. But that being said, there is a public meeting tonight at the Lodge at Camp Helen State Park at 5:30. DOT is putting on the meeting to take any public input. And I'm also sure if you have other input and you can't make it tonight, they'd be happy for you to contact them directly. So it is moving along. So now our challenge is to get that funding in place that we need. So the DOT expects the construction to cost about $4.5 million. The $2 million that's already in their budget is covering all design and permitting and all that stuff, most of that being design, and $1 million toward construction. So we've got a $3.5 million target. Now, the project is currently on the Okaloosa-Walton Transportation Planning Organization's prioritization list for capacity projects at number 21. What we've been told is that if we can convince the TPO board to move this project up as high as possible in the top 10 projects in their upcoming prioritization process for next year, which is starting this month and continues over the next 4 months, their prioritization process, that we should be able to get funding for the remainder of construction in DOT's work program upcoming. So that would mean that when the design is complete this fall, they can move on without a delay because they're waiting on additional funding. So we have been told that it would help a lot to get that TPO board to convince them to move this priority project up on the priority list if Walton County is willing to put in additional funds to show the local commitment and interest in the project. So there is currently, on the April 9th BCC agenda, there's going to be a request for $500,000 in prop fair share money additional to what's already been approved. So that will be on the April 9th agenda. And then DOT, if you notice, this was DOT's suggestion before we could even get to them on it. They want to put the TDC logo around the tops of all those little columns you see. Some of them are not that little. Some of them are short and some of them are tall at the entrances. Those columns are very important at the entrances because we want to maximize how much this is used. So that will do a great job to draw people's attention to those entrances. So DOT, not me, came to Jay and Tony Anderson and asked if the TDC would consider adding some funding, local funding into the project because it will be a TDC branded structure. And if you all are okay with that, which would be a good topic of discussion today, and it will also clearly service our tourists as they're moving about through that area and make it a lot safer for our tourists. It's just a wonderful double benefit that it'll be great for our residents as well and property owners here. So that's how this all came about, and it's how it's landed on your plates at the moment. So that would mean if we can come up with about $1 million in local county contribution, that would leave $2.5 million for DOT to allocate in their budget next year to finish out the project. And so at that point, DOT would have about $4.5 million in the project. So it's not like the county is being asked to carry the project financially. Another thing I wanted to mention that's very important, and I'm sorry that there's a lot here, so I'm trying to be quick, but there's a lot to cover, is that there's another important contribution to the project in that Brent Chandler, owner of the Donut Hole, is, not every single detail has been worked out, but it looks very, very promising that he's going to donate that property. That property for that northern entrance is on his land there at the Donut Hole. They think they've designed it such that he won't lose any parking, which is really important. But he has generously offered to donate that property. So we would have, without that, and Brian Core, developer and owner of 30 Avenue, is also donating a small piece of property for, I don't know what, a lift station or something. They need to put something else over there. So, and then the south side entrance is all on Walton County property. So of course Walton County's coming to the table to contribute that property. Otherwise, we would have a hefty right-of-way acquisition component to this project, and it would be significantly more than $6 million. It's hard to imagine. But that's a
Lee, you
big...
keep going up. Five,
I know.
5.5, 6.
Well, those dollars don't get added because of the generosity of the folks donating that property. So I wanted to mention that because that's important. It's a private contribution that's really important to the project.
Lee, can I ask you a question real quick?
Sure.
Are there any other private individuals, businesses, neighbors? I'm thinking Rosemary Beach, Alice Beach. Is there anybody willing to donate to this other than public entities and what the Donut Hole is donating? And
We had some contributions early on before this became a DOT project because our committee did some surveying, conceptual design and engineering work just to find out if it was feasible in this spot to determine what the best location was, which that's been a topic of discussion, by the way, and DOT confirmed that our choice at the eastern section, part of the intersection, was the right way to go, the best way to go, let's say. And also some geotechnical work to be done to determine where the water table was and things like that. So that was all important work early on, and that all came from private contributions from the community and the surrounding area. Now, most of that got supplanted because DOT had to do their own work. So just to be honest about it, which nobody could avoid that once it became a DOT project. But they did put forth some monies for that as well. So,
Lee, two questions. Well, one of them was the land acquisition, because I was curious to know how much. I didn't see a number in there for the land.
Yep.
So that's good to know. Number two was, what was your initial, I guess, estimate that y'all did when you did your surveys and all that other stuff? What did you have in compared to now?
Yeah, this has been a real educational process for us, to say the least. We had all private quotes. We got full-blown quotes on all phases of the project, design, engineering, and construction. It was coming out to between $2.6 and $3 million at that point. So that's why we're short on funding, actually, because when we were initially putting our funding requests out, we didn't realize that that cost was going to go up. And so the money we initially got from the state was intended to be cover most of the project, and it didn't happen.
Well, Lee, first of all, I enjoyed listening to your presentation, and I always enjoy the topics and the subjects you work on.
Thank
So
you.
thank you for being here and representing
Thank you.
our best interests. This is an important topic because I understand, if I heard correctly this morning, there was a pedestrian death in Okaloosa County in Destin this morning. So this is an important topic. Was there a pedestrian traffic study done at that Inlet Beach intersection?
There wasn't there, Kevin? Kevin can answer that better than I can, but there's been some work done
Good morning, Kevin.
Well, since you're here, I'll extend the question a little bit more.
Okay.
Was there a traffic study done, pedestrian traffic study done at this location? And were there pedestrian traffic studies done at other locations along 98 in the county? I know that Jay had mentioned earlier the issues on the west side of 98. And I think about that pedestrian and bike traffic at Old Highway 98 crossing over to Silver Sands. It is much more daunting, in my opinion, than in the beach intersection. That's important, and I don't want to take us away from that, but I see other intersections that are much more dangerous today, you know, in our world. So your comments, sir?
I don't actually have the report to quote from, but for preparing for our public meeting tonight, our consultant had got some things together. And one of his quotes in here was, there was a 2018 bicycle and pedestrian safety study prepared for DOT. And a quotation out of that is, traffic counts were conducted on a Saturday in July to capture a peak pedestrian demand and vehicular volumes at 6 locations on US 98. Of those is County Road 30A, Wall Street, Orange Street, Walton Lakeshore Drive, Grand Point Boulevard, and Camp Helen State Park. The highest number of bicycle pedestrians observed crossing US 98 within 1 hour at a single location was 62. So that was 7 p.m. to 8 p.m. and it was at County Road 30A. So it was at this location. As far as moving in the same
west
distance.
side, right?
Sorry, I'm sorry.
Yeah, all of those are east of 38 and the Bay County line, every single one of them.
Between
Well,
those 2 points. Can I
And I don't think it addressed your question
Right.
about what's happening to the west.
Can I address that too? Listen, I am very keenly aware, you know, my employer is Howard Group. So there are a lot, and I've had actually a lot of people come to me, citizens in that area. I wouldn't say a lot. Some people come to me and say, we need something to make it safer to cross 98 because they don't on foot and bike much. So I think that's one, because of their fear of that daunting intersection. That's one issue, is that in Inlet Beach, they're crossing on foot and on bike, and little kids and sometimes unattended little children. The amount of foot and cyclist traffic, if you go down there during season and spend just 30 minutes, you will be terrified and overwhelmed. It is terrifying. And the other thing is that from a timing perspective, the widening project at, going through Miramar Beach, which encompasses that intersection, it was too late to get a project added, part of a project added to that to get the underpass. I hate it. It would have been a great time to do it. If you're already tearing up the road, that's perfect. But it also could complicate that, as we can see from this project. So I think that should be on the radar screen. I'm not going to personally advocate for it because it will seem self-serving. But from a timing perspective, this one's ready to go, and that one we have to wait until that roadway project is done.
I understand. I remove your conflict of interest. I don't represent the Howard Group, but I understand how dangerous that intersection is today and is going to continue to be. So
Very much
Inlet Beach, we continue to move forward on the project, but I would propose a pedestrian traffic study where it's identified in Walton County there are real issues. So we have an opportunity to address them before there's a fatality or a safety issue.
I agree 100%. And that's where we feel the folks around there and local that have been working on this, we feel like we're in a race against time to keep a disaster from happening at that Inlet Beach intersection.
I work at Alice Beach and I live right around the corner at the mall, so I go through that intersection about 6 times a day. And, you know, you see a lot of near misses and a lot of, I mean, just in the last week with the influx of more spring breakers, it's a pretty scary intersection. As I understand, there's going to be more development happening on the east side or on the north side of 98, so people are going to be drawn even more so across that way. And so I do have a question. As far as the sidewalk and the pedestrian path along 98, there is some work between like Shades and Donut Hole heading east. Are there any plans to do anything heading west down 98?
That's a great question. Now, this is to the bigger East Corridor Improvement Project, speaking to that. Yes, there have been all along. The original project called for those wide offset from the roadway pathways to go in all the way from the Bay County line to Watersound Parkway, both sides, hopefully. And St. Joe, of course, is very interested in that. They just did the Watersound Parkway between 98 and 38. There is sort of a vision and goal for that to be a continuous loop around that triangle, so to speak. And so that hopefully will come. Look, the challenge is funding. We're here today talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars. So yes, there's a full intention for that. We've gotten very focused on this underpass because of the critical need at that intersection for safety right now. But that is not forgotten. And in addition to that, from an aesthetic and safety improvement standpoint, more landscaping, roadway landscaping is also in that plan.
And is the underpass, it'll be open 24/7, well lit, how wide, do we know how?
It's 12 feet wide, 8 foot high, and the ramps are also 12 feet wide. So we'll add lighting inside the tunnel, and Gulf Power, we just did a JPA with them to add lighting within that area. Some of that's gonna have to get taken out. I think one of them's right where the tunnel's coming up out of the ground. So we're gonna have to rework some of that, and we may have to add a few lights, just to provide the proper lighting.
Thank you.
I've
Chairman, I
also-
have a question.
Kevin? Yeah.
From
Go
a,
ahead.
me?
Yeah.
From an engineering perspective, you probably don't have the answer to this, but I'm gonna ask it anyway. Service levels, the counts that they did those counts indicate that this tunnel's needed or some sort of overpass is needed based on the pedestrian traffic, or?
I haven't, like I said, I haven't read the study on that, so I don't have that information. Just from my engineering judgment being out there, I think we went out, it was probably about July, and sat there, at the Walton County parking lot there, and just watched folks pass for a while. And there are a lot of pedestrians crossing. I know it's peak times of year, which seems to be getting broader and broader. The off season seems to be shrinking in all around this area. So,
Well, the saying is you don't build a parking lot for the holiday weekend. And I'm not opposed to it by any means, and that's not where I'm going with this. I just want to make sure that the studies that are done can support some sort of improvement to that intersection. That's what I'm looking for.
right. As far as I know, this study is the only one that I've knowledge of now, and just found out about this one, say last week, being that this project came from the private folks. So I'm not sure what other studies may have been done.
Can I ask a question?
Can I ask a question?
You go first.
Was there any additional parking for cars in that particular, other than the donut hole? Was that added in there?
No, not in this project.
Was that in there?
Are some private efforts undergoing now. Now that there were some zoning changes made in the recent amendments to the Inlet Beach plan, neighborhood plan, and the comprehensive plan that will provide for that possibility. And so while we can never guarantee it, I think you will see some additional parking come in soon from a private perspective. But we just didn't have the property availability or anything like that to incorporate it into this project. But one goal was to not lose any parking. And that's challenging because these entrances, as you can see from the renderings, take up a good bit of property. So DOT and the designers worked hard not to do that.
Lee, there's currently a traffic light at that intersection. Are there pedestrian signals at that intersection?
Yes, they're push button activated.
Do people use them?
Yes, and they use them appropriately and inappropriately, meaning they don't wait sometimes, which is terrifying, but it's scary enough when they do have the light. But this brings up an important point that I meant to mention earlier. One thing that we asked and DOT graciously agreed to is that the pedestrian crossing and push-button function will go away just at that part of the intersection
I
once the
understand.
tunnel's in. We really don't want people to cross there at grade. And so that will help us to redirect people to the tunnel entrances.
The reason I ask, and I'm not trying to get away from this project, but if you look at all of the, where Old 98 kind of starts and goes west, and 98 continues to go west, and Silver Sands is right there, the outlet mall, and the tremendous amount of growth on the north side of Old 98, trying to get to the outlet mall. I mean, it's just a fatality waiting to happen there.
It is.
Probably times 10 as to what you have here. And I'm not trying to diminish this. I was just curious as to whether there were pedestrian signals at that intersection today.
Yes, there are. And I will say this too, that some members of the TPO, who are all elected officials, you probably already know, in Walton and Okaloosa County, not just Walton County, Okaloosa too, have been closely watching this project. There is a great desire throughout the Okaloosa-Walton region and Florida from a DOT perspective to improve pedestrian and cyclist safety on our major roadways especially, all roadways, but we've got some real issues. So my hope is, and interest from bodies like yours will help this, to be quite honest with you. My hope is that this will be the first of many, and that we'll, over the years, you can see from the expense and the time that this stuff takes time, but over the years, we will put in a lot of these. I don't know how many a lot is, but at these critical pinch points, because I really believe, and I'm not a transportation expert by any stretch, but I have been working on transportation projects in South Walton and Destin for the last 5.5 years now. It is really challenging to make an intersection on a heavily, I'm speaking the obvious here, on a heavily traveled road safe for pedestrians and cyclists without completely separating that traffic from each other. I mean, DOT has been wonderful over the last 5 years. They've made several intersection improvements at grade there in Inlet Beach, and they have helped, but there's no substitute for either an underpass or an overpass. The key is you have to design them such that they'll be used. And they've worked hard with us on this. If you put switchbacks in, elevators to an overpass, whatever, stairs, people will not use them. And they have made this design such that somebody can get on their bike and ride through this tunnel without ever getting off. Now, they have to go around some pretty sharp corners, but they can do it. And same with walking. It's very easy. There are no stairs unless they want to. They did put some stairs in if people are just at 98 sidewalks and they just want to drop right down. It's completely, of course, ADA compatible, so people in wheelchairs will be able to use it. The usability is critical, and I think they've done a great job
Lee,
planning for that.
will it be designed for golf carts?
No.
Good.
And that's a good question. Yes. Let me put it in perspective for you. When we did that little stretch of pathways from 30A to Orange Street,
Yeah.
DOT made us put in 12 no golf cart signs.
Yeah.
That's a short stretch right there, right? They are very concerned about golf carts that close to the traffic on 98. So if they use the tunnel, they will spill out onto those sidewalks inevitably. So we've even talked about maybe putting up ballards or something to keep them out. That would be very dangerous, and also dangerous to mix them with people on foot. And on
Kevin, can I ask you a question? When you put a tunnel in, I guess you tear up the roadway and everything, build your ditch, make your tunnel, and then pay back over it. Is there any, and you may know from your position with FDOT, is it more economical somewhere in the state where they've tried this, where you just bore underneath, as opposed to tearing up the whole road and then have to rebuild the whole road again?
I don't have a lot of experience about the borings, but I know a lot of the time you bring in a big auger rig and you need the room, obviously, to have the pit to do the bore.
Sure.
And I think in this area, we just don't have it's so tight that I just don't know that you have the room that you need to do that. And then as far as a cost perspective of it, I really don't know. We never went down that road. I think from a cost perspective that there probably are some savings from tearing the road up and some diversions and all, but I don't know that it would be any cheaper. I can't really speak to that side of it. But. I
Thank
think
you, Kevin.
I think your purchase of whatever equipment you need and all is gonna be, it's gonna offset a lot of that, I would assume, because I don't know,
You don't buy a boring machine, you rent a boring machine.
well, or whoever the contractor is and what the size needs to be, they may have to, you know, I've heard that those things get used and they pretty much don't leave and go to another job, and I don't know, there may be some smaller ones or something, but I really
Right.
can't speak a whole lot to
All right,
that.
thank you, Kevin. Stacy, go ahead.
From a security standpoint, will there be cameras that are monitored? Will there be officers stationed? You know, during the day, I think it's fine, but at night, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, you're riding your bike back through a tunnel, even though it's well lit. I'm just wondering if that's been considered and what suggestions there may be.
From our perspective, we wouldn't be the one to maintain that, but we are planning on putting conduit in the tunnel or just providing, either putting the conduit or providing some type of access where security cameras will be easily added to, depending on who's gonna monitor that and take care of it.
Tom, you've got a tunnel, but you're.
That
I-
needs
I-
work as well, by the way.
I couldn't resist. But I think your situation is a little different. Number one, you're a gated community. Number two, which obviously excludes, you know, public access. And number two, you have security 24 hours a day. So I don't know that that's a fair case, but I just wanted your comment on it.
It's a wonderful thing, but it's also problematic. And our tunnel's old, so, you know, it's not gonna be anything like this one, but
Yeah.
it comes with challenges, and this one's going to as well. And
What are the challenges you're facing with yours?
ours is the multi-use between bicycles, pedestrians, and golf carts. And taking golf carts out of the mix is gonna be the best thing you ever did, I can guarantee you that. The maintenance is, I guess, is not gonna be on DOT, it's gonna be on the county afterwards, so. It's a challenge, but it's a worthy challenge, it's one of those that is needed. I mean, you can't say this isn't the thing to do, I would never say that.
Okay, I just wanted your perspective because you have a tunnel.
No, to get the people safely from one side to the other, I don't wanna put them on highway, and they go there now, I mean, they avoid the tunnel and go across, and it's just like it is at any other intersection, and it's a pain, and people wanna get across before the light turns, you know, it's.
Oh, I love the tunnel because I live in Sandestin and it's zoom you through, you know?
Exactly, it's a great addition, especially to this area here.
Well, yeah, I wanted some perspective from you because you're the only one that has one, so, go ahead.
You know, I'm not speaking for the board, but I personally support this project. We have to be forward-thinking, and I think that intersection is going to see heavy growth and more use over the next 5 to 10 years. So I wish we'd had the same on the west side towards some other locations and intersections that we've previously talked about. So let's talk about dollars and cents. $500,000 is a pretty hefty request of the TDC. You had mentioned a number presented or approved by Walton County Board of County Commissioners. Was that a $225,000 number, if I recollect?
Yes, there's been 225,000 approved, and there will be a request on the April 9th agenda for another $500,000.
Pretty heavy.
And plus, Walton County's contributing that property at the south entrance.
So you're receiving some pretty significant support from Walton County already towards this project. You know, I would probably be more open as a board member, a number similar to what Walton County has already approved, 225 to 250,000 versus the $500,000 you're requesting, because it's just a pretty significant number. And I think what you're hearing from the board, at least what I'm hearing, is there are other needs for like projects up and down the corridor that's going to require, or there'll be requests for financial support from this group as well. So we have to be cognizant about the request and the amount of the request that you're asking for from
Well,
us.
I'm not asking, just so you know.
Yeah.
So
Sure, and let's just.
technically, I support it. Well, Matt, before, I want your input, but let me just throw one thing out. Look, I'm a citizen. I'm working on this project as a volunteer citizen. I actually represent Scenic Corridor Foundation on the committee. And pedestrian and cyclist facilities are one of our biggest focuses as a nonprofit organization. So I'm speaking from that perspective as well. From the amount, I'll be a little bit technical. If you're going to do that, and it's totally up to you all, of course, and then it'll be totally up to the Board of County Commissioners to approve it or not. If you go lower, this is just a silly little detail. I would suggest that you do 275 so that we end up with an even $1 million contribution in total from the county that I can then tell the TPO board about. It'll just feel good, better than if we're short, I think. A little bit.
Lee, tell us again what the projected starting date is. Do we have that?
Starting date of
Of this.
you come online live. You could probably
When
better
is this gonna start? Let's say you get all your funding, when is this slated to start? It's obviously probably in the 5-year plan.
start construction or be
It's not in
live.
the 5-year plan?
No, sir, we don't
Not
have
yet.
construction funding yet, so it's not there. But the discussions we had is, say today, we had all the money that we needed to be funded. We had actually talked about potentially advertising, in the first half of actual 2020. So it'd be within our fiscal year 2020, potentially 21, just depending on how things progress. Right away was one of those things. We're planning on having the project complete, plans on the shelf, ready to go, and hoping to have all of the right of way, everything worked out by the end of this year.
Gotcha.
So it's just one of those, at that point, if we're ready, we're just waiting on the funds to come in. So if the project gets funded, we could push it up.
Chair. Kevin, what about, we're doing a lot of 6-laning. In my understanding, they're moving up the 6-lane from the Mac Bayou down 38 towards 331. What's gonna happen with this?
We're designing the tunnel to accommodate for 6 lanes in the future. Yes, sir. That was one of the first things we did, said would be ridiculous to spend this money and come in 10 years from now or 5 years from now with a 6-lane and have to tear it out or extend it. So the length of the box should accommodate 6 lanes, no problem.
That's like building a new bridge on 331.
So, Lee, correct me if I'm wrong, so the other risk to going lower in our contribution is that we may not get up into the priority section of the list that we're hoping for. And so what Jeff just outlined is a program that is almost all, it'll be designed by 2020 and will be under construction by 2021, or it will be complete.
Yes, if we had the funding,
Yeah.
I think within our fiscal year 2020, late or 21, we would advertise and go to construction.
Right.
I think our construction time would probably be, I would say, a year.
Yeah.
Something
So
like
these
that.
projects take years to kind of come to the forefront, and this one is bubbling up and it's getting close to being shovel ready. So the risk is if you stay out of that priority list, we could be waiting several more years. To put it in perspective, $6 million project, $500,000, it's about 8% of the project. So if you've got other sources of funds sitting there ready to put up 92% of the money, and they're looking to you for 8%, I'll do that project all day long. It's not even counting the cost of the land that, if you imputed that cost, this could be close to a $10 million project. That's just the fact.
Mark made a comment about reducing the amount, and obviously, if we approve this, I want to wait till Jay gets back. Anybody need to use the restroom, go ahead, and we'll take
Well,
them.
I can maybe fill the time with kind of a fun component of this potentially, just to think about for the future. We meaning the committee that's working on this, the East Corridor Committee, we would love to do a public art project when the tunnel is complete and line the walls of the tunnel with public art. We think that that'll just we want this to be a fun, interesting experience, right? And so the entrances to the tunnel will be what they'll be, and FDOT brought this suggestion, or the designers, or both, I don't know, to do like a dyed, very light blue dye on the exterior walls of the entrances and make it a wave texture. So it'll just soften that up. These things don't tend to be aesthetic enhancements, quite honestly, right? They can be pretty industrial and ugly. They're doing a lot to soften that up and make it more appealing visually But inside the tunnel, and we've had, listen, very, very preliminary conversations with the Cultural Arts Alliance. We would love to partner with them and do a fun community art project and end up with some nice art on the walls in there. So that's exciting to me. I think that could be really fun.
Mark, you brought up a comment, and taking your comments that as well, that, you know, 500,000 out of a potentially $10 million project, if you take the cost of the land that's being donated. And then your comment about possibly reducing the amount, and taking that off in consideration. I think this whole discussion, whichever way it goes, is gonna open up a box. And that box says, we need one at Silver Sands, we're gonna need one here, we're gonna need one there. And Jay, correct me if I'm wrong, if we approve this would be something that would go into our 2020 budget?
Correct.
So it's not something where we're using existing funds? But what if we did this? What if we took and made a commitment for half of it in 2020 and half of it in 2021? That way, it's a little easier on our budget. I mean, everybody goes, well, you know, you guys take in $25 million, or $25 million a year, but it all goes pretty quick. And to throw $500,000 out at something's a lot of money for us. And we have a responsibility to be fiscally responsible for what we do with that money, even though the ultimate decision goes to the BCC. I'm just gonna throw that out as an idea, is that we do half for 2020 and we do the other half. Then you have the commitment, you know that the money's gonna come, but it doesn't take such a big chunk out of our little chest.
I don't understand 100% with DOT how the funding flows time-wise.
I mean, if you had the commitment from us, but it was over a 2-year period rather than one lump sum, it would still be counted as committed money.
I would think so. That's something I'd have to follow up on, but definitely don't mind running that down and checking on it.
Jay, do you have any comments on that?
I mean, it works for us for budgeting. I'm just not sure if it works from a DOT perspective. I mean, that's for them to give us that yay or nay.
Historically, DOT has treated projects that have local match component funding over a number of years. If the project is initially expected to be funded by them in the first of those years as not a full match. Now, policies change, but I can tell you in other projects the county has dealt with and that the cities in Walton County have dealt with, typically breaking the match up when the DOT is saying we're funding all of our money year one. They don't see that as a real match. They're saying we're not breaking our money up over 2 years. We're asking you to put your money up year one as well. Gotcha. So the only thing I will add for the TDC, and I may be premature on this because there's not a motion on the floor. However, please do note that if you do make the recommendation to approve the BCC, this is likely one of those projects that will either be one of two things. Either one, the BCC will need to make a legislative finding to somehow fit it under an element of the statute that is not public infrastructure, and therefore pass a legislative finding that supports the use of the TDT for this project. As we know, typically infrastructure projects are excluded from the statute. However, now infrastructure projects are allowed. So to the extent that this is funded and any future similar projects are funded, this may very well fall under that new statutory provision we've dealt with since last year for public infrastructure. In that case, whatever the total dollars of the project are, if it's, let's say, $500,000, the TDC can only contribute 70% of that. The BCC would have to find 30% of that elsewhere. So when we talk dollars, while it's not for your purview to address what monies the BCC does or does not contribute, and I certainly don't want to step on Mr. Nick's role when he gets to the BCC table, so he doesn't have to comment today on this point, but if it falls into that public infrastructure, TDC will obviously have to pay for an independent study showing that it benefits tourism directly. That'll come out of our coffers, so that'll be additional money we have to pay. But it would not be surprising, and I think it would be prudent for the county to look at their total dollars given to come up with that 70-30 component. So understand The TDC committing 500,000, if it falls into public infrastructure, either the county's gonna have to come up with a number to make up that balance, to come up with 100%, where 500,000 constitutes 70% of the number, or the TDC says we want to fund 500,000, but only 70% of that, or $350,000, comes to our budget. County, you got to put the other 150 up. So, because this is an infrastructure project, we may have our hands tied a little bit in what can happen. That's at the level above you. Your role today is just to make a recommendation. You want to see it funded. Certainly, I think it can be under the infrastructure role. I'm not prepared to opine today that it can fit under something else outside of that in this statute, though. And ultimately, that would be the BCC's legislative prerogative.
Thanks for confusing the issue.
Yeah, and I have a confused, hopefully clarifying question, if that's okay for Mr. Atkinson. So, Mr. Atkinson, if the county has already approved 225,000, I'm not able to do this math that quickly in my head, but I think, and they approve an additional 500, does that count toward that 30% requirement?
That's going to be up to the way the county wants to include the money or define it. The simple fact is, for TDC money to be used for a public infrastructure project, the total amount expended cannot exceed 70% of the project. The county has to come up with at least 30% of it on its own. So, do I think the county could find a way to pull all this money together and say, we've contributed this much or contributing this much, we're within the 70-30 infrastructure? Off the top of my head, the numbers seem to work. I'll defer to somebody up there with an accounting background or over to our staff that does that, but I think it is possible. The only element is the TDC would then need to commission an independent study to verify that this would have a direct tourism benefit. So that is going to be some dollar amount additional the TDC would take on.
The only other reservation I have, boy, you killed our 9:30 quit date, didn't you?
I know, I'm sorry.
And it goes back to what Clay just said, is all we've had for a study at this point is somebody sitting there and watching at one point, at one time, and 62 people try to cross the street. And to me, I think we need maybe a little bit more information as to what the actual issue is as far as pedestrian count, bicycle count. That to me is just real vague, and you know, DOT's behind this thing 100%, but is it based just on that one study of 62 people trying to cross the street in a given hour? I mean, we asked you to come prepared, so you can ask those questions.
What level was it at the TPO again?
It's number 21 on the capacity list, which means roadway and bridge capacity projects.
Okay.
Are you all comfortable with just that number?
Not really, but let me ask you a quick question too. I know you're getting ready to give us an answer on something, but where would this move us to on that list if we came up with the funding?
Well, this speaks to what Mr. Hagan was mentioning earlier. That is completely up to the Transportation Planning Organization Board. It's 19, 21 people. They're all elected officials from the municipalities and the county commissions in Okaloosa and Walton County. Walton County is at a significant disadvantage because we are a smaller population. So I believe we have 7 of those 20 seats. So actually, Okaloosa has been very supportive, especially in recent years, of prioritizing Walton County projects. But the more support Walton County shows for the project, the more moved those board members are going to be to vote that up the list. We'll be moving ahead of other projects for both Walton and Okaloosa County. So it's a pretty big deal. That's, I think, what Mr. Hagan was speaking to in a way, that they really need that show. This is not necessarily technically a local match, as Mr. Atkinson was speaking to. It's more conceptually. The TPO board wants to see the county's support for the project. So does that kind of answer? I have been told we could potentially, if the county support is strong, get up to number 1 or 2 on that list. We'll see. I've learned you never know until a vote is taken what's going to happen. I've learned that the very hard way. But look, there's a lot of positive momentum. I will say that. I've worked on a ton of projects in the last 5.5 years. I have seen very few projects that have this amount of government, citizen, business support. And all the way to the whole TPO, not on the whole TPO, but the TPO board, DOT. I mean, they want to see this happen. The last thing DOT wants to do with a project is have it designed and sit it on the shelf and not be able to move forward with it. That's my understanding from them. And that's the last thing we want. Like I said, I think we're in a race against time, which leads me to Mr. Veltman's question. I don't know what to say about it other than to say there's no countywide study of intersections to determine which has got the most traffic and is the most dangerous. This thing took flight, so to speak, because of the experience on the ground in the area and at the intersection. I have been away for a couple of years, but I used to live in that area as well for 3 years. I have recently moved back temporarily. This is not self-serving for me. I own property elsewhere. I'm living there while my house is being built. So I've had that accusation before on certain projects. It's not about me at all. But I've seen it firsthand. Walton County is the second fastest growing county in the state of Florida, the sixth fastest growing county in the country, which astounds me. And Inlet Beach is the fastest growing area in Walton County. There is such a concentration of activity there, both resident growth per permanent population, the commercial development going in there is just astounding, and there is more to come that nobody even knows about, but I know about because I'm involved with all these folks down there because of this project and others. So I think it's experience on the ground that is telling us to get this thing built ASAP, because I'm telling you, and that's actually, we got, Tony Anderson has been a big supporter of this project, and he became a big supporter of it a few years ago when he spent some time down there at that intersection. And that's, he got up the gumption from doing that to go to the state and say, we need money and we need it fast, and we don't need to be in a 10-year regular old DOT TPO process to get there. So I don't know if any of you have had experience there that can speak to that, but that's where we're coming from, to be quite honest. And I've watched, I'm not trying to use emotion to do this. This is real deal. I've seen little kids on their little tiny bicycles across that road at that intersection, trail out, 2 or 3 or 4 kids behind mom and dad, single file on bikes, people walking. I've got a photograph of someone stepping out into that intersection, and there's a semi that looks like it is just right, and that was just somebody on our committee standing there taking a few pictures one day. So that's the best answer I can give you right now, Mr. Veltman, but I'm telling you, I know in my heart this will save lives, and that's, I don't know that I get to work on that many projects that I can say that about. This one will.
Mr. Chairman, it sounds like DOT is committed to this in some way, shape, form, or fashion, which means if you know governmental bureaucracy, they've already done their analysis and come to the conclusion that yes, there's probably a need for this to go there. And I don't, if we sit and look at today, I don't think we're accomplishing anything as visionaries, and that's only going to grow down there. If you go to the west, there's no other land. And I think the next place is going to be West 38 when they develop that. So, we can talk about this ad nauseum, or we could move on with it and let staff figure out what the best option for the.
This is one of those opportunities where this is a big amount of money, and it certainly has our interest. Otherwise, we wouldn't spend this amount of time talking about it.
I agree.
And we want everybody's input. We want everybody's opinion on this council so that we can make a recommendation that we're all comfortable with. And that's what we're attempting to do. So
I agree. I fully agree with you.
Yeah.
Sure.
Mr.
And Mark, to what you said earlier, listen, I would wholeheartedly support more of this type of, pedestrian flow, backed by the Silver Sands project and other areas, this is long overdue. I mean, anytime you place a whole bunch of services on one side of a major highway and you put a whole bunch of residential on the other side, you're creating a tension and a need for safe pedestrian flow. And I would support additional projects like this, but I fully support this one, and I think it'll lay the groundwork when we all see how successful it is, as to what could happen in the future in other areas.
Jim?
I agree with you also. I don't have a dog in the hunt down there, but the ability for growth in our area, that's one spot that it really could help out. And there's a limited amount of money that actually can be used by the TDC in this kind of stuff, because I was part of the group protecting this fund, trying not to let this happen, actually, before in the legislature. So, I think you can use a little bit of funds, but you could only probably do one of these a year at that level, and that's gonna cap out how much the state's gonna allow you to use for infrastructure.
I don't want anybody to take any of my comments as being negative towards this project. I just want to get everybody's feelings out there. I think Tom made a good point. We got to be visionaries in what we do, and there's a responsibility that goes with that. And like I told you earlier, at some point, this is going to open up a box, the TDC money box, from other entities saying, all right, we need something in Silver Sands, or we need something somewhere else. And we're going to have to address those as a county, as DOT, and most likely the TDC.
Yeah, well, that's a good point, and that may well happen, but the way as slow as these projects move, that could be 3 years from now.
I'll tell you
5 years from now.
Here's my feeling on the whole
Yeah.
thing after listening to what everybody has said, and this is my final comment on it, and that is, there is no life worth losing over $500,000. That's another way to look at it.
Sure.
We can't afford the fatalities anymore. There's, Mark brought we just had one yesterday or this morning. And at some point, we're gonna have to address that. I think the DOT's done a great job by putting, you see sidewalks that aren't being used, where the grass is growing through the cracks. But, the mandate to have the bicycle paths and the sidewalks on every project going forward, I think that mandate came out a number of years ago, it has created some safety, so they're apparently aware of it. So I'm done with my comments. Anybody else has anything to say?
One or two last ones. As a county, this was a point well made, Lee, because I'm a big proponent of this. What we do a lot of the time is we kick the can down the road. And we have gotten to a point to where, nothing against the BCC, but we really got to start focusing on doing this. We are the fastest growing county, basically the fastest growing county in this Gulf Coast region besides Baldwin County, Mobile. Now, all that being said, all this stuff, we've got to start thinking about the parking. We got to start thinking about the pedestrians. We got to think about how these people, where they're going to park. We promote it through the TDC. They come from Tallahassee, they come from Dothan, they come from Montgomery, they come from Mobile, Pensacola. They drive over here, they park, and they ride their bikes. They walk. We may have some transportation later on. We're just not seeing the big picture here. We're not seeing the forest for the trees. We have got to start doing something proactive. We've got to quit sitting here, kicking the can, beating on the drums, doing all this other stuff. It's time to start doing something. So if this project, if it's, I guess my last question is here. We need to start doing something. So that's fine. Let's do this. St. Joe's got a big traffic light coming down the road. They may have to do the same thing, because that's going to be 1,500 homes back there in that neighborhood. And they got a traffic light getting ready to go up. So somewhere along the line, we're going to have to start doing some things and making some changes, because we got to protect our pedestrians, we got to protect our communities. If we raise the money, or you raise the money, we put in our money. If you don't build it, then we don't contribute. But is there a chance that we won't be able to build it?
That's a funding question I don't have the answer for, but as a department, this project came through the House bill and legislator, and our central office is is supporting it. You know, we're giving them updates bi-weekly. We fully support the project. I personally feel like it's gonna happen. I can't give you an answer to say that it's 100%, but, you
Is
know.
your question, if it doesn't go through, do we get our money back?
Right. Basically.
Yes, well, I don't think we're
our
planning
commitment
on
comes
taking
back
money
to-
for.
Okay, it's not spent on something else and we don't see the money anymore, we don't get
No,
we don't get our tunnel.
If we get a commitment to this project, that's what it would go toward.
Okay, all right, that's it. I'm
Any
good.
other discussion? All right, I'm open to a motion.
I'll make a motion, we request recommendation to the BCC to fund $500,000 for the Inlet Beach pedestrian underpass.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any comments from the public? Yes, sir. Good morning.
Good morning.
I know you, but you still have to state your name for the record.
Good morning. Cliff Nauer, KNAUER. I know I don't look like an avid biker, but I do live a block away from here on 20 Grayling Way is my address. Me and my next door neighbor are residents. The whole rest of our block are short-term rentals, Grayling Way, just about the entire street. And so everybody in my neighborhood and a lot of Inlet Beach has figured out that you can go to any restaurant you want to in Rosemary, you can go to any restaurant you want to in Seacrest if you ride your bikes. But if you drive a car, you cannot park over there. There's no place to park. And so if you ride your bikes, you can get in no problem. If you drive a car, you got nowhere to park and you can't go to the restaurants. And so I got an 8-year-old, a 10-year-old, and a 14-year-old. And we ride our bikes all the time across that intersection. And what makes it dangerous is two things. The kids will press the button. The sign on the other side says cross. And I have trained my kids that they do not cross until all the traffic has stopped on 98, because a lot of times they'll try to make that light and blow through the light, even though the sign that says, you know, come on across, you got 20 seconds. Okay, so that's the first issue. The second issue is I always go in front of all three of them, because people coming off of 38 that are turning right to go east, they don't look for pedestrians. They pull straight out. If you're crossing, they pull straight out. And I've literally stopped cars probably a dozen times from hitting my kids that are making the right that don't even slow down or stop. I mean, they just blow through the intersection, even though the pedestrians have the right of way. And so it is a serious issue, and it is extremely dangerous. And I support the project fully. We use it all the time, and I think it would be a very forward vision move for this board to fund it and to see this get built. And there are other places that need these as well. County Road 395 and 30A has 200 pedestrians per hour crossing that intersection right there. That was just done by Atkins. And I proposed a tunnel there 4 or 5 years ago, and everybody thought I was crazy. But a tunnel needs to go at that intersection at some
We're not
point
going
as
to
well.
answer that question whether you are or not.
So I support the project fully, and I appreciate you guys.
Thank you for your
Thank you,
comments,
Cliff.
Cliff. Any other comments from the public? We have a motion and a second.
Do we have any discussion? Was there,
Is there any discussion?
yeah, 20, you had mentioned the 20 and 21 split. Is that, should be or no, or?
That's not in the motion. The motion
Okay.
is made as to do, allocate it in the 2020 budget, next year's budget, not this year's. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Mr. Chair, can I ask for just one sentence,
No,
other than saying thank you very, very much?
that's the only thing you can say. Go
Mr. Norris, I could not agree with you more, okay? I would rather actually not be here today doing this in this way. I've been advocating for 5 years now for the county to do a master transportation plan for this county. And we should, Mr. Velman, this goes to what you were talking about. there should be studies done. We should have key intersections identified where there's infrastructure needed to achieve exactly what this will at this particular intersection, among a lot of other things. The county took a huge step last year and came up with a master pathways and trails plan. That would be the perfect place to insert this type of plan as well, and plan the whole thing, parking, everything, transit, shuttle, whatever. All of it is transportation related. We've got to get our arms around it and get ahead of it. We're way, way, way behind.
I agree with
Thank
you,
you.
and
I would
I
help
thank
you
you very
champion
much
that
for your time this morning. Thank you. That was a good, healthy discussion.
You said we should be down here by 9:30? Did you say that earlier?
Well, that was until she showed up.
You know, it's lunchtime, that's just for that.
Does anybody need a break, or can we keep going? Everybody good? All right.
Like a bonfire right there.
Yeah.
Hey, Brian, can you see if you can get that thermostat to get off air conditioning, or? Get the bell, see if you can I am freezing.
It's really.
Of course, I didn't
We
wear
need it
my
up,
suit.
not down.
Put a coat on.
Don't do this.
That's
Tony
the
does
new
the same
style
thing.
now. That's
Yeah.
new style now.
Tony just wears casual clothes, and then when he has to go to a meeting, he just puts a navy coat on. I'm untrainable at my age. Go ahead, Jay, I'm sorry.
All right, so for the next agenda item, we'll try to keep this one down to a half an hour versus the last one that was an hour. That was just a joke. Anyway, Lee is going to come up with the next agenda item as well. That wasn't a joke. So for the next item, we have request for a recommendation to the BCC to pursue undergrounding utilities in South Walton. So we've chatted about this at the TDC Advisory Council level in the past. We've talked about this at the Destination Improvement Committee. And so Lee and I have talked, and she is very passionate about this. And not just from an aesthetic standpoint, but also from, we look at our neighbors to the east and what happened with Hurricane Michael. And so, it takes a lot to rebuild a utility grid. And so there are merits to undergrounding utilities besides aesthetics. So Lee's going to come up and talk a little bit about just where we are in the process and what the ask is. And the ask at this point is not financial. It's just support to explore what our options are and moving forward with this, just to see if it is a viable option in the future. So anyway, I'll turn it over to Lee.
Thank you, Jay.
Thank you, council, if you haven't had enough of me. Again, I would prefer not to be doing both of these today. It just fell this
Jason,
way.
put her on the 3-minute timer, would you?
That's going to be tough. All right. So I am the chair of the Destination Improvement Committee, and that is why I'm here today. As you know, at our November meeting, we unanimously approved to bring this to you guys. And so now here we are. I want to say one thing out of the gate and reiterate what Jay just said. I've had a little bit of concern expressed to me of, we can't spend TDC dollars on underground utilities or whatever, which I think that's probably an unanswered question at this point. But what I want to say and make a huge point of is that when our committee voted on this, we did not speak of what funding would be used. This was to propose an initiative for the county to start looking at putting together a plan for undergrounding utilities. There's been no determination or expression of desire about how it will be funded, how much of the utilities will be undergrounded. I would hope 100%, me personally, but who knows? So those were the things that we talked about, is identifying the facilities that are currently overhead. Where are they? What type are they? Get a high-level cost estimate on undergrounding all of that, which would require a lot of help and cooperation from the utility companies. Prioritize those areas based on need for any number of criteria. Identification of potential funding sources, and then development of a timeline. And that's an important aspect of this too. There was also no expectation that this would be done in a year or 5 years or 10 years. I mean, my guess is that we all know this is incredibly expensive, but I am never one to say, well, then let's don't do it, because this is critically important. So that you know, that's all to be determined, but right now, it's not an initiative. It's getting done here and there piecemeal, most of the time privately, sometimes as part of county projects, which is always kudos to that. So I wanted you to know that that was the spirit of this, is that, and it came up in the Destination Improvement Committee because we're charged as a committee with both accepting suggestions from the public and making suggestions ourselves on how to improve South Walton as a tourism destination. And this was a resounding, approval for this being a great way to do that. So I wanted to make those points. It's also a given that the county would have to work with the utility companies, all of them, not just power. You've got a lot of third-party attachers on those poles as well, which can, I'll be honest, be a challenge in these projects. I've followed projects for undergrounding across the country. So the best thing to do is for the local governmental entities and the community, both resident and business, to come together and get behind it, and then go to the utility companies and say, please be a part of this team. I've been asked if I've talked to the utility companies about this. I absolutely have not. That is way above my pay grade, okay? And Little Lee going to these utility companies and talking about this is not what needs to happen, in my personal opinion. That needs to be the county with a whole bunch of support. Speaking of support, I've got a little packet here for each of you. These are actually paper clips. We made it to the paper clip stage. So after we found that this was going to be on the agenda, I started asking around to see who would support this type of initiative in the community and in the business community, in the resident and business community. So you've got a packet there. I was getting letters this morning, so I hope I got all that arranged correctly. I think I did. But I'm just going to quickly read the list of letters that I have so far. I fully expect more to come in. There were several organizations that gave letters of support. One, Walton, Scenic Walton, also known as Scenic Corridor Foundation. We're about to announce a name change. Friends of Scenic 30A provided a letter. Trees on the Coast, the Sandestin Owners Association, the Historic Inlet Beach Neighborhood Association, Jeannie Daly with Newman Daly, Reynolds Henderson, his firm Henderson Barrett, Mike Ragsdale, the 30A Company, David Everett, Alice Beach, Brent Chandler, Donut Hole, Brian Core Group, 30 Avenue, Jamie Price of Grayton Beer, Keith Howard, Howard Group, Kurt Tate, Hibiscus Coffee and Guest House, former cohort of yours up there, Bridget Precise, the St. Joe Company, Mark Schnell Urban Design, he's an architect in the area, lives in the area, Jay Nettles, Seascape, Roger Hall, Sacred Heart Hospital on the Emerald Coast, and John Freer with Inlet Beach Village, Crossings at Inlet Beach, and the shops at Inlet. And I've also been told that the Walton Chamber approved a letter of support for further exploring this in some fashion, but don't have that letter in hand yet, so I'm not 100% sure what it says. But so that's what I've got so far. I'll continue on, and give me a little time, and that stack will probably get pretty darn thick, I'm guessing. So so we're just here today to ask that you consider recommending up to the Board of County Commissioners that they pursue this and put a serious plan in place. It will take time just to craft that plan. This is a huge undertaking and initiative, but many communities and cities around the country are doing it more and more. And we're also getting, and Jay is right, you know, I'm always looking for aesthetic and ways to enhance this destination and this community for our residents as well. This goes way beyond aesthetic improvement, and especially we're getting more utilities undergrounded, so we're getting more data after natural disasters on how they perform. Irma was a big one. Now Michael, I'm sure we'll start getting more data as they've had time. They've been focused on other things, like the actual recovery effort, but on how well undergrounded systems perform versus overhead, there is absolutely no comparison. Now you will hear things, you will hear pushback. You will hear that that they are susceptible to damage from flooding. That is absolutely true. I think technology is improving drastically in that area from what I'm hearing from people in the industry. But yes, but if we have a total washout, flood out of our electrical system, we've got other problems as well. But in most storm scenarios, they perform much, much better than overhead. And I just think about this destination, and if we got a hit during any part of the season, whether it's peak season or our ever-growing shoulder seasons, there's a lot of devastation clearly from a storm. If you've driven through the areas to the east, and historically you see it. But being without power for weeks, in addition to the devastation of the physical devastation otherwise, just exponentially compounds the problems. We have people that can't get out of their neighborhoods to get to help. They don't have power, so they can't use their health devices. If they have health conditions, that can cause problems. You can have homes that have roof damage and they get water in them, and the problem is that they don't have air conditioning for weeks, so the home molds and the home becomes a total loss, whereas it could have just been a roof repair. I don't think anybody has ever really gotten their arms around the cost of this post-storm totally. We do have a lot of data, but I think the costs are much higher than what we even think, not to mention loss of life. So, which, just like the underpass, you cannot put a price tag on that. So a lot of us, and I've gotten a lot of support expressed through these letters as well, and in conversations, feel like it is time that we are more and more likely to be impacted by more and more severe storms, and that this would just help our resiliency. If we are down for weeks, the impact to county revenues, because we all know that tourism and related industries drive our revenue base here in the county. Just even PR-related issues after the fact and trying to rebuild ourselves as an attractive tourist destination. Having that power stay on more, in more cases, I know it won't be perfect, never, will only benefit us there. Last point I'll make, my talk is going to be shorter this time, and then we'll see what questions there are. There was an article in Politico on just March 19th of this year, and in that article, it was about a bill that's making its way through the state legislature that would give investor-owned utility companies the ability to use special rate recovery clauses to recoup costs of storm protection measures that they take. One of those listed in that bill is undergrounding, in addition to their base rate. That's a complicated thing, but just take this part out of it. It detailed that the president of Florida Power and Light, which is the largest investor-owned utility provider in the state of Florida, his name is Eric Silligy. 2 weeks before that, this was March 19th of this year, he told attendees at an energy conference in Houston, a week before that system resiliency will be a major focus area for their utility company. He said, "We've spent a lot of time to harden and make our grid smarter. As an industry, we need to look at that much more closely. We're looking at a programmatic approach to underground all of our lines. We've got 74,000 miles of lines in our system." So that's the CEO of the largest energy or power provider in the state of Florida. And they also happen to be their parent is also the new parent company of Gulf Power, which serves part of our area. So that's what I'm here for, representing the Destination Improvement Committee today. You've got the letters of support. Last thing, I'll pass around a photo. Not that you need this because you see it every day, but ironically, a few weeks ago, I was walking at sunset in my neighborhood down in Inlet Beach, and I took this photo. It was a gorgeous moon, and I was trying like crazy to get a good shot of the moon. You would think my biggest challenge would be my iPhone camera and capturing the moon, because that's really difficult for some reason. But it wasn't my greatest challenge. And you can see in that photo what my greatest challenge was. That is a road in a neighborhood at the beach here in South Walton that runs along the homes that line the coast there in Inlet Beach. And I had a hard time. I just couldn't get a good picture. So I could have driven around South Walton and taken 500 pictures like that in other places. So that's what we're here about. I'll take any questions that you might have.
I just, for the record, would like to make a comment that at one of our meetings last year, and every year you're delaying this stuff. but the latest, let's say a year ago, estimate for underground utilities south of 98 was in excess of $100 million. So that just gives the council some idea of what kind of dollars we're talking about to accomplish this.
We just had I looked at doing it at a section of Sandusky, I think it's 3,000 feet, just the infrastructure, not moving all the wires and everybody else's wires and the cable and the TV. It was $1.5 million just for the infrastructure underground.
Oh, listen, nobody disputes this. This is a massive undertaking. You know, 100 million. You know, for our county, I wouldn't doubt that a bit. I mean, our company, we paid for it out of our own pocket 12 years ago at Grand Boulevard, and we spent about $2.5 million, and we did 3 different stretches. One that ran right through our project, one that kind of crossed over out onto 98. And then so when you get to our stretch of road, you'll notice everything's underground there. But to us, it was well worth it, and we would do it again. But this is a project that will take, you know, it'll have to be a comprehensive plan with multiple sources of funding. This will have to come from the utility companies involved, potentially federal, state, and local funding. I mean, you know, there's just a multiple interests. Perhaps, you know, the utility customers themselves, but you know, you don't ever get a big project like this moving at all unless you at least, you know, go out and perform a study and try and understand what all the moving parts and pieces are. What are we up against? Do we even have a chance of doing this? The benefits are obvious, and they're outlined in the various letters that are here, but you know, it's a worthy cause for sure. I would support at least taking the next step.
And I would also like to say this, I think we'd be lucky to get it done for $100 million. But, you know, many of the areas that are undertaking these comprehensive projects, it's over 20 years, 25, 30, 50 even. So if you start looking at $100 million over 50 years, or let's say it's double that, that's $4 million a year. So that's the kind of vision that I think is going to be necessary, not we're going to get this done in 5 or 10 years, because then it just becomes undoable financially.
Yeah, my point was just to let the record reflect that
Yeah.
today's prices.
It's very expensive.
The other thing is that one of the things Walton County could do is, as they approve subdivisions, and there's a lot of them being, since everything south of 98 is pretty well gone, there's a lot of subdivisions coming up north of 98. And one of the things the county commissioners could do is tell these communities, you know, you have our approval, but you got to put in underground utilities.
I think private development on property, not the public roadways along it, is required already.
Oh, is it?
To underground.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure new construction,
Good to know.
but not the roadways along it.
I understand.
But we do have some, and I have to give a shout out, not just to my employer, but many companies who are doing that, undergrounding along the public roadways that front their property, and I think that they deserve huge pats on the back for that.
Okay, any other questions for Lee?
I'll make a motion to request the recommendation to DCC to pursue underground utilities in South Walton.
Second. We've got a motion and a second. Any comments from the public? Seeing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Seeing none, motion passes. Thank you, Lee. Appreciate it.
2 for 2.
Jay, do you mind? We'll take 2 minutes.
Not at all.
All right, we're gonna take a 2-minute break.
Where is it?
Jay, you have the floor. Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman and council members. So we'll try to get this moving along since we're a little bit late in our time. Actually, I'm jumping the gun here. The next one is the event sponsorship program. So Kelly Carter is going to come up and run you through that. We just had a meeting with the events grant committee and with the marketing committee. We did a joint meeting between those two committees last week, and it was a good meeting. We kind of informed them of the changes that we were proposing, and they liked what they heard. You know, we like to get feedback from our partners and how we can make these programs better and stronger for them, easier for them. And so that's what this change is. And I'll let Kelly kind of walk you through
Okay.
specifically what the changes are. So, Kelly?
Morning, Kelly.
Morning, Kelly Carter. So the changes that we're proposing to the events marketing grant would now be the event sponsorship. The current event grant program would allow this program to be a true sponsorship program, and the current process is quite cumbersome with quite a lot of reimbursement and that sort of thing. The new program would mirror the very successful North Walton program, where we allow the events to receive their money up front rather than that long, lengthy reimbursement process. We would also look at making the amounts consistent across the board. If you are a large multi-day event, then you are consistent with a $20,000 grant or $20,000 sponsorship. And if you're a smaller, maybe one-day event, then it is consistent with a $10,000 sponsorship. The current scoring and approval process would stay the exact same. So those of you who have been a part of that in the past know that you have to meet quite a bit of criteria in order to get into the program. This would just allow these events that maybe are not quite as capable of putting out $20,000 and then waiting for the money to be reimbursed to them. This would give them the money up front and allow them to purchase that advertising when they need it and at the rate they need it, and not wait on the back end sometimes 60 to 90 days after the event happens to be reimbursed. Those are the changes that we're looking at. As Mr. Tusa said, it was approved by the Marketing and Communications Committee and was approved by the Events, Activity and Culture Committee. So those are the changes we're proposing at this time.
Question.
Yes, sir.
You mentioned that one of the changes is going to be allowing the money to come up on the front end.
Yes, sir.
But you also have a lot of criteria and responsibilities to that group to fulfill in order to get that grant money. What happens in a case where they don't fulfill all the responsibilities that they have to get sponsorship, and we've already given them the money?
Well, for the most part, we have really good partners, and
I know you do.
They
It's just-
typically do everything we ask
It's
them
a
to.
what-if question.
It is a what-if question, and it's the scoring criteria for the following year would also reflect that. So say you have an overall score for the following year of an 85%. The staff is then allowed to take 5 points off of your scoring. You have to make 85% or better to stay in the program. If you take 5 points off of the overall scoring next year, you no longer get into the program. And it's also, when you look at the criteria that we have in place, it's not a hard criteria, but we do want them to do the things that we ask them to do, and it's fairly simple, and it's anything that you would typically see in a true sponsorship form.
Right. And I'm familiar with what a lot of those are. I was just curious that when you give the money up front and they don't fulfill.
And we have some back and forth things that they sign saying that they're going to do, so just like you would do any sponsorship.
All right, thanks, Kelly.
So I would need a motion to move this forward to the BCC.
So
As
moved.
presented.
Motion to
We got
move forward.
a motion to approve the changes to the event sponsorship program.
Second?
We have a second. Any comments from the public? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you,
Thank
Council.
you, Kelly. That was easy, wasn't it? Glad your name isn't Lee. Oh, she's already left.
All right, that one was quick. Hopefully this next one will move through rather quickly as well, but I'm just not sure. So the next one is discussion of a satellite visitor center in Miramar Beach. And I have the parcel number there, and I'll just read it real quick just for the record. 302S21420000050000. So in part of the discussions that we had last year, as part of our strategic plan, was the opportunity for satellite visitor centers in the east and west gateways coming into the county, so the Bay and Okaloosa County lines. And just wanted to bring an opportunity to the council and just kind of have a conversation with you guys and how you might want to move forward with this, if it's something you want me to bring to the board for consideration. So there's a piece of property over in Miramar Beach. Do we have a visual on there that we can show them? Is that?
Well, you've got a map here.
Okay, you have a map. Okay, so you have the map there. Okay, so what you have there is a map of the property, and this is about 2/10 of a mile from the county line. So it is right at the county line. And this property is right now one parcel, and the developers are looking at. Do you have it, Commissioner Nick?
I got it.
Okay, great. And so the developer's looking at taking this one parcel and dividing it up into 4 different parcels. So what they'll do is, you can see it there, there's 4 properties in a little street with a cul-de-sac kind of running down the middle of it. And I think it's highlighted in yellow. You can see the one lot that we're talking about. It's lot number 2, and it's 1.34 acres. So this size property is actually larger than what we currently have at our site. Right now we have 1.1 acres. So in talking with the real estate agent for the developer, he said they're talking to a hotel group about that lot 4 in the back corner. And he said that the hotel is actually looking for a little more property. So if we don't need the 1.3 acres, which I don't think we do, maybe we can negotiate something and get a smaller piece at a lesser price. So, and the real estate agent was certainly open to that conversation. So I just kind of wanted to disclose that to you guys, kind of where that is. And just let's talk a little bit about price. So it is 1.34 acres, and the asking price is $1.751 million. So $1,751,000. So wanted to point that out to you. And if for some reason, and I don't have this on a diagram, but I'll just talk through it, if we're not interested in this piece, there's another piece a little bit further down on 98 between Ellis and Professional Place, which is about 3/4 of a mile from the county line. This property is much larger. It is, let me find my notes here, make sure I give you the right information. It is 4.8 acres, so a lot more property than we need. It's also a lot more expensive. It's $5.5 million. Now, this owner is willing to do some owner financing, but again, I just don't know if we need that size of a piece of property for our needs, and I don't know what else we'd use the property for. But anyway, just kind of wanted to point that out and just have a conversation, since this is a little bit different council than what we previously had when we went through the strategic planning process. Wanted to see if there was still an interest there in possibly having satellite visitor centers, and just kind of wanted to talk to you about that and just see what your thoughts are.
One of the things that we've, in my tenure, that we've tried to accomplish is that people that stay in Sandestin, people that stay on Old 98, people that stay at what we call Miramar Beach, if you walk up to any one of those people and say, "Where are you staying?" They go, "Destin." And then when they go home, they go, "Yeah, we went to Destin for vacation last year." And I think that kind of perpetuated the idea of trying to create an identity and a separation from Okaloosa County, Destin, Fort Walton Beach. And certainly this isn't going to be the kind of welcome center that we're going to envision.
No, it'd be a much smaller visitor center than what it's going to be at the new complex, for sure.
Right. I'm sure this would be a lot smaller. And I've used visitor centers on trips just to get maps and familiarization of, if I didn't know the area. And even if we don't do anything right away, price of land is only going to go up.
It is.
$1 million for 700 feet on 98.
It's 1.7.
Right, but it's
million
you said 700 feet?
I don't have the footage. Let's see if it says it on here. I don't know if it does. It does not. So I don't have that.
I think it's a gradual thing that we slowly educate the public that we're not Destin, because that's all you hear,
I agree, and I think if you really program the space to be more interactive and kind of an immersive experience, it's not just a place anymore. It's still very valuable to be able to go in and get brochures and maps, but have some interaction there and almost make it a destination in itself to discover South Walton.
I love that word, and so for the new visitor center, we're actually toying around with calling it a discovery center, where you discover South Walton and all of what we have to offer.
Right, just 10 miles down the road, as 38 starts in the coastal dune lakes and all these beautiful state lands and everything. So I think if we program it right, and you can hold events and activities and talks and experiences there, I think it could really become something that people look forward to going into each time they're here to learn more. I did have a question about staffing. This would be a 7-day a week.
It would be. So right now, at the current visitor center, we're 7 days a week, and we operate from 8 to 4:30. And so we'll look to have those same operation hours. So right now, we are just picked up a staffer. So right now, we have a manager, and then we have a lead specialist, visitor information specialist, and then we have 2 more people, and then a part-timer. So we just expanded that, but I don't think we need to do that at building a new center. I think we probably get over 3.5 employees. And something that I've talked to Christy Gibson, who's our visitor center manager, is possibly using volunteers a little bit to help with some of those hours. So maybe it's somebody comes in for 2 hours here, 3 hours there, a few days a week, but we have a force of volunteers that we can maybe utilize. So that way it kind of saves us on benefits and salaries as well. So something we can certainly explore.
And that's a fantastic idea, because then you get the local perspective, and that's what people want when they travel now, is to become more of a local and learn kind of the inside secrets and where's the best place to go and when to go. So I think having local participation, volunteers would be great, and it also connects the public with what the TDC does on a daily basis. So I think it's a great idea if we could make it work.
And the other thing is, we all talk about what the sales of merchandise is gonna be at the new center. And at this location, you're gonna have the same thing.
Yes.
You're gonna have people buying and wearing South Walton gear instead of Destin gear and that sort of thing. The only other point I'd like to make is that if you could split some of this off or put that in the contract, obviously you want the easiest access. And so, once you own it, you can pick which.
Yeah, well, the one right now is Lot 2, and that is 98 frontage. So obviously, the back 2 lots, 3 and 4, we would not be interested in those. We want to be on 98.
No, I'm not, but what you said is that a hotelier is interested in 4.
In Lot 4, correct.
And so you would give him the eastern side of Lot 1 or sell him the eastern side.
Perhaps.
But you don't need that much space,
Correct.
obviously.
Yeah.
So the cost obviously would go down.
I would think so, yes. I think we could probably do away with anywhere from a quarter to a half an acre.
Yes, yeah. Okay.
And then just real quick, Stacy, you had mentioned, staffing. So I had Jason just kind of run some numbers for a staff of 4, it's about $160,000 in salaries and benefits. And then operationally, we're probably looking at about $30,000 for water, sewer, electric. So that's about $190,000. So I think we could say probably $200,000 to be safe to operate this satellite visitor center. Now, obviously, we'd have to build it, and I think we could probably build something for $600,000-$700,000, just depending on what we put in it. But that's just kind of a ballpark.
Well, you don't build a Dollar General on $1.5 million piece of property. Unless it's
Well, you
your
can.
neighbor.
That would be our neighbor.
We'll have something in between us, between that, us and the Dollar General. Yeah,
Between the two,
little
yeah.
separation. Yeah.
Like I say, land is never gonna go down, and if we have an opportunity to get something at the Walton County line and continue, in my mind, what's been going on for a number of years, and that is to separate ourselves as a destination from what everybody calls Destin. I think it's a great idea, and I think we should.
Well, we could do some signage specifically, welcome to Miramar Beach, South Walton, so that people know, okay, they're not in Destin anymore.
Yeah, that little sign there that we have now, most people are looking for their hotel keys or whatever.
Looking for the car that's gonna run over it.
That's right. And to have something that has that kind of an identity right at the border of Walton and Okaloosa County, I think it's a great idea. So my feeling is that we ought to move forward and let you continue to.
I think Tim had a comment or a question.
Yeah, obviously the price is a little bit high, being in the business, the real estate business, it's, and 2 questions out of that was, there's a potential hotel going in that larger
Correct.
parcel? Do we know who's going in the
I
other
don't
2?
know that, and that's something that I'd like to have a conversation with the
know.
developer on, just, we want to be aligned with the right fit for South Walton. So they had talked about some retail, a restaurant, and then the hotel. So I think that would all be part of the conversation is what is this going to look like, and make sure it's a good fit for us. And then to your point about the price, obviously we always do 2 appraisals on property that we buy. And so we do 2 appraisals, and what we do is we average those 2 appraisals. So
You're looking at about about $500,600 for an acre on 98 right now, so that's, maybe 650. They're stretching it a little bit right there with $1,700,000.
But our purpose today is to only let him
Yeah.
further.
But I'm just giving you just FYI,
Well,
just so
we
you know.
appreciate that, because you're an expert.
This is what I do,
That's right.
you know.
That's why I call you up and ask you all these questions about real
I
estate.
told you about this, and this. Well, there you
This
go.
this is only to allow him to further, he's not gonna make a decision to buy anything. He's gonna come back to us and say, this is what we've got.
Next step would be to bring it to the BCC, and then we can start moving forward if we want to do an appraisal, and I can talk to the developer just a little bit more in detail.
Yeah, and I think we worked it out to where you don't need that whole acre.
Yeah.
You know, an
No.
acre and a third, so it's,
You're going to sell
You
part,
gotta-
sell part of it off,
Right.
and then you'd be in for $500,000 or something.
yeah.
That would make a lot
Well,
of sense.
I can explore it some more and bring it back to you at the next meeting, and then I can have some conversations with the board as well in the meantime, make sure they're good with it. Would, Clay, should I just get a motion from the board, just so I can bring it to the BCC?
Could I ask one question before we?
Sure.
You indicated it was Highway 98 frontage, but on this one, it looks like there's a lot between lot 2 and.
It does look like that.
No, it's, the parcel says lot 1 and 2, which indicates there's not, but what is that?
I believe that's the right-of-way for the road.
Or the power, where's the power line at? That's
So-
the power line.
You can kind of see on the property appraiser's map where the property line is and where the road is. So there's quite a distance there. So there's a little bit of an easement there that they use for obviously the road, and then also I believe the power line run through there, and it's a power line easement.
Oh, okay, that's what it is, that's the power line.
That's Bank Trust Building on the top of the page, Tom,
Bancorp South. Power line, Bancorp South.
or Bancorp, yeah.
Anyway, sounds good. Motion to move forward.
Have a motion to move forward.
I'll second the motion.
I have a second. Any comments from the public? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Thank you, Jay.
All right, and we'll get moving on the director's report, and we'll try to get through those as quickly as we can. We know everybody's time is valuable.
Morning, Dawn.
Morning, Chairman, Council, how are you? Dawn Trumper, for the record. We will go through this information quickly, but it's good information that I'm happy to share. We recently went to Connect Financial in Denver. That was 21 appointments, one-on-one appointments with that high-end ADR financial segment. We also sponsored all of the registration bags, and we're able to get information into the hands of each and every person, even if we did not have a one-on-one appointment with those. Then we went to Rendezvous South in mid-March as well. That was 18 one-on-one appointments. And then while we were in Houston at that event, we did a private lunch with additional 15 planners in conjunction with Sandestin. So that was also a very successful event. Upcoming, we are going to Nashville. We're doing a reception on Tuesday night and a lunch on Wednesday. We will anticipate about 25 or 30 clients right now. At each of those events, we're getting RSVPs now. We're taking Jenna Varney, our new Artist of the Year, so that she can show off what it's like to live and breathe and paint in South Walton. And then we're also taking Grayton Beer so that we have 2 ambassadors going with us. We are waiting to hear back from Smart Meetings. They actually approve if a supplier matches with their client base. So we've put in for that to go to Dallas to see if that's a good show for us. We're waiting to hear back now if we've approved to go to that. But if so, we'll be there April 22nd. So recently, Downs and St. Germain did a survey for us. The full survey, which is about 56 pages, was sent out last week in the newsletter. I am not going to share 56 pages with you today, but there are some key pages.
That's correct.
Yeah.
That's a good idea.
Right. Good idea. But there are some key information and slides in your packet today. I am going to hit the highlights of those as well in respect for your time. But the first one I wanted to point out was the people that we spoke to on this survey. They came from our database, And then they also came from hotel partners databases. So we had a collection. We sent the survey out to about 4,500 people. Some people who chose South Walton, some people who contemplated us but went to another destination, and then people who have never considered us. So that's where you're going to see the three sections of people: contemplators, choosers, and avoiders. We like to look at the contemplators because they thought about us, we were narrowed down, but then they decided to go someplace else. But we also want to take great information from the people who choose us as to why, so that collectively we'll use all of this messaging moving forward. The good thing I want to point out about contemplators is when we asked them how many meetings a year you have, it's on average of 16 meetings. So even though we're having one conversation with them, they have the ability to bring 16 to our destination. And same with choosers, you'll see they have a little over 8 meetings. So if they pick us for one, the great opportunity for them to come back, even if they are different sizes and in different locations across South Walton, is great. The other good thing about these groups is we always like to talk about shoulder season, and so this is where the group business really comes into play. You're able to see on that second slide, and the one I have up for you, is that the bold of March, April, May, September, and October, 37% and above, sometimes half the business comes in those shoulder seasons, and then even 24, 29, and 28% in January, February, and November. All good news for all of us as we look to continue to build those shoulder seasons. So, not surprising, but just to point out, some of the key top destinations they also consider besides us: Amelia Island, Charleston, Savannah. We find a lot of our customers are looking for that relaxed, bikeable, walkable, a little step back from where they're going. There is a big part of Destin. We go back and forth, kind of to a previous point. Do you think you're in Destin, or do you know you're in South Walton? There is a luxury hotel in Destin that has come up several times as well, but we're not sure if they actually are identifying themselves, if they really know they're in Destin or South Walton. I'm going to move ahead to a couple of other activities. One of the things that's important is that, and we shared this with our restaurant roundtable last week, the biggest interest for contemplators is restaurants, above shopping, above beach, above golf. So we'll take that into consideration as we continue the messaging, because we do have such great restaurants and a variety. We'll continue that in our messaging. I'm going to skip through some of these.
I just have one quick question.
Yes.
And I think it was going to be answered in one of the slides.
Yes.
Was there a question of, as far as awareness, were people leisure guests first and then became
Yes.
more interested in bringing back business as a meeting planner?
Yes, very important to know. Almost 37% of the people who brought a meeting here first came here for leisure, and then another 35%, the meeting planner was recommended by an employee or a staff member who also came here for leisure. So as we continue those sort of blurred lines of leisure and meetings, a lot of why they're coming here is because they were familiar with it first on a vacation standpoint. So our advantages are clear. I think one of the main things that we'd like to show you, and I am having individual meetings with our hotel partners this week and next, just to get their deeper thoughts on this as we go forward. But one of the things continues to be transportation, and how do you get here and the ease of getting here. So one of the questions we asked was, what would you not ask your attendees to endure from a time standpoint to come to the destination? And almost 50% from a drive standpoint and from a fly standpoint. 3.5 to 4 hours was the breaking point. So the reason that's important for us, even for flying, is where to focus our efforts. So that is it the direct flight market and drive market, and how much of a layover are people willing to do? So that will help us from our emerging markets. The great news is Atlanta, Nashville, Dallas, Houston, all of those meet that criteria, and they continue to grow economically and from a population standpoint. So those are the highlights of the survey. Any questions on that before I move on to Visitor Center? Okay, so our Visitor Center numbers for January. 2,064 visitors January, which was a 15% increase from the previous year. Our February visitors, 2,432, a 7% decrease from 2018. Year to date through February, we've seen 6,957 visitors come through the center, which is a 10% decrease from 2018. Merchandise sales in January, $5,167, which is a 21% increase from 2018. And February, $7,913, which is a 6% decrease from 2018. All total in our sales year to date, February, $28,505, which is a 5% increase from the previous year. And now we'll move on to marketing if there are no other questions. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Morning, Kat.
Good morning. Catherine Andrew with Zender Communications, taking the place of David Demarest, Interim Marketing Director for the day. Just to give you a quick update on some of our marketing activities. For our website performance, we're seeing over 200,000 unique visitors in the last period to the website, which is an increase over last year. And then specifically looking at that traffic by channel, you'll see that social media has overtaken organic search. I'll show you why in a little bit, but that is both organic social media and our paid social media. For our digital programs, continuing to see millions of impressions from our brand campaign, our events campaign, and our co-op campaign. But what I want to draw your attention to here is the click-through rate. Industry average is typically around 0.24%. So we're exceeding that in all of our campaigns, especially our co-op program for our partners. Here's where you'll see why social media is overtaking as our #1 traffic driver. For the website, we had our top performing paid media content for both January and February were social media posts, specifically on mobile. If you look at those click-through rates, they were extremely high. One really exciting thing about this is it's content that's showing visitors how to experience South Walton. So that tells us that they already know about us, and they're really diving deeper into that journey to come here and explore more of the destination. David has shared with you the 2019 publications that have come out. We actually have 2 new ones that have printed that are in the Visitor Center and also being mailed to partners. The Scene Guide, which is arts and culture, and then Explore, which focuses on our outdoor activities, has a number of area maps. You guys have those in front of you. One great thing about these smaller publications is they're obviously genre specific. So a lot of our partners appreciate that they're smaller, they're easier to hand out. And then also they are more willing to hand them out over the visitor guide because they don't have competitor accommodations listings in them. So it gives an additional opportunity to sell the destination to our visitors. And then a website update. We showed you guys a sneak peek at the last meeting. We are only a few weeks away from launching, which is very exciting. And then one thing that we've done since the last meeting is some usability testing. So we tested our target audience to have them go through, use the site, make sure it was giving them the information they needed, they could navigate easily. And we also opened this up to our partners. So we got the feedback from both our partners and the anonymous usability testing and are implementing those changes. So next time we see you guys, we will have a brand new website live. Do you guys have any questions on marketing before we give our communications update?
I think we're good.
Awesome.
Any
Thank
comments
you.
from anybody? You must be Sean.
That is me. Yeah. Good morning, Mr.
Good
Chairman,
morning.
chair members. Sean Streeter filling in for David Demarest today, who's vacationing somewhere warmer than here skiing in Vail. So let's see. Here's the clicker here.
That was just in this room, right?
Yeah, just in the room. Yeah. As you'll see first in our year-to-date snapshot, we've reset our numbers for the calendar year, so we have only one media visit in the January-February timeframe. That number will go up here shortly as we have some upcoming FAM trips that are going to add to that number. We had a FAM scheduled with a writer from Chicago Magazine for later this month that the writer had to cancel for personal reasons. But the good news is we're still going to get the article out of it. They're going to be writing that in Chicago Magazine. Very interested in the new direct flights from here to Chicago. We have a weddings FAM at the end of this month, which is weddings focused. Some excellent journalists already confirmed for that, including a writer for Weddings in Houston Magazine. Digital graffiti FAM trip scheduled for next month that will also be arts focused. And then we also participated in the Trav Media's International Media Marketing in January, which was a terrific opportunity to connect with some journalists. Last year's IMM secured us the coverage in National Geographic last year, so it's a great opportunity to connect with a lot of great journalists there. Some of the current pitch themes that we're working on include Wine Lovers Paradise, new flight options from Chicago, as we mentioned. Also weddings that we have the FAM trip, the Underwater Museum of Art, the second deployment happening this summer, a really great opportunity to pitch and to share everything going on in South Walton here. So a lot of really cool things happening here. One of my favorite things to do today is to introduce one of our newer employees, because that means I'm no longer the newest member of the communications team. So that is Katie Feeney. And Katie, if you want to wave, there's Katie. She is our social media specialist, which is currently a lot of our social media is handled by the Zender communications team. So we're excited to have Katie here locally to be able to kind of get out and showcase South Walton from a more local and intimate perspective.
Does that mean Zender's contract's going to decrease?
I don't think so. Exactly.
We get a rebate.
Yeah. Some of the highlights from the last couple of months in the media, really cool coverage from Southern Living Online, Coastal Living, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, Reader's Digest, just to name a few. You'll see some more on the screen there. Some really terrific coverage, which would be traditionally, for a lot of other destinations, a full year's worth of coverage has been just our first quarter here, so we're very excited about the coverage that we have there. And the next couple pages are just how it looks in print, the fun part of it. So you see all the beautiful pictures, and that, I think, is about it. So is there any questions?
Any questions from the council? Comments?
Thank you for your time, and so bring up Brian.
We like your energy level because it warms us up. Brian, good morning.
Good morning, Chairman, council members. Brian Kellenberger, Director of Beach Operations. Appreciate your time this morning. A few updates. Beach maintenance, garbage for January and February ran about the same as the year before. Typical uptick in this time of year. Our capital improvement projects for the multi-use path included the pedestrian bridges at Draper Lake, Eastern Lake, and Deer Lake. This is our Draper Lake project, complete and open. Deer Lake is open, and Eastern Lake. Deer Lake will start later this week, and it'll be closed until May 24th. Possibly sooner. We're putting in a complete new metal span on that one to match the rest of our bridges. Our capital improvement projects for the renovation of our existing beach accesses, we've completed or almost completed 10 of those for what we called our winter-spring effort. The rest of the 2016 project, or ones that were identified in 2016, will take on in the after the summer season, so as not to impact people that are renting and the renters that come here.
Quick question.
Yes, sir.
Refresh my old memory. Didn't it at some point have an approval to place public restrooms at Grayton?
Yes, sir.
What is the status of that?
We're having a meeting tomorrow with Commissioner Anderson and some Grayton Beach residents to talk about that. So
But
the.
wasn't it originally scheduled to happen prior to having any
Well,
meetings with anybody?
the previous approval by this board and the BCC was to do a constructability study, which that included FDEP, inquiry as to what can be done, where can it be done, and to do some conceptual designs. So I have those, and after the meeting tomorrow, I believe that they may be on the BCC meeting either on April 9th or quite possibly the first meeting in May.
Gotcha.
And then we'll bring them back here after that. But,
Right.
so we're working on it. It's gonna be a tough project, but definitely needed down there.
Can we put one of those just portable, kind of,
Outhouses.
We previously had,
the nice one that they have on a, kind of like a trailer where they can, people can utilize that right there. That'd be pretty helpful for right
Yeah.
now.
Many years ago, we put, prior or previous to me coming on board, we had put some portalets out there, but they proved to be problematic. They, were hard to service. They got tipped over by people that think that's fun. And the general consensus was that they didn't really fit the image.
That's why I mentioned the bigger one.
Yeah, like you see at football games.
Yeah.
Well, and you see them at the Arts Festival too.
The Arts Festival,
We can certainly, we can certainly inquire about
More
that.
upscale, it looks real nice, and, it
Yeah.
would help accommodate some of those people, because I hear a lot of complaints that said, y'all need some bathrooms out there. And I'm like,
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll bring it up at tomorrow's meeting and start doing some research on to see what it would take. As in any project we do, one of the things that we have to undertake is the community's attitude on it.
But it would be temporary until you get the permanent ones in.
Right, but even a temporary facility, there'll be some people that think it's definitely needed, and there'll be some people that think it's the most atrocious idea in the world. Every project we do.
It's gotta go somewhere.
Most of them are
There is no
like-
doubt, there's a need, but it goes back to everything we do.
I understand.
Capital improvement project is, I want it, I just don't want it in my backyard.
Right.
We saw that at our last meeting where we were discussing public parking. One lady stood up and, demanded that we do public parking, and then she stood up 30 minutes later and chastised us for trying to do public parking. It's just amazing to me sometimes.
Well, that's when you use common sense, it just gotta go.
Hey, that's y'all's job. I'm just the implementer of policy.
There's no common sense in OCD.
Anyway, so our 2017.
I just needed an update, so thank you for, I
Yes, sir.
didn't
Yeah.
interrupt you.
2017 projects for our existing beach accesses, we're about 95% complete with design and permit, and we'll start getting those online, of course, during the off-season, whenever that may be identified, and we'll get them done with the least amount of consternation that we can to the people that they affect. Dune Island Regional Beach Access, we're under construction there. Project will take about 6 to 8 months to complete, and that's coming along like it should. Miramar Regional Beach Access, about 75% complete with design and permit. We received the planning department approval for our land zoning change, and we'll be on the April meeting for the BCC, and then about 4 to 6 months more on design and permit for that. Seagrove Beach, we're complete with all land use changes. We're in design and permit. This is going to take a little bit longer because it has some wetlands that have to be mitigated. Beach maintenance garbage collection updates. Still getting about 60% of the garbage collection stations that were on the beach prior to House Bill 631, and we've adapted to get all of our public accesses from the top side. It's not the best way to do it, but we're doing it. I think as we progress through spring break and into this summer, we're going to see what a necessary amenity that is that the TDC provides, and I'll keep you updated on our efforts. Beach code enforcement, total contacts running about the same as they usually do this time of year. Spring break doesn't affect us too much. Sheriff takes care of most of the issues regarding spring break. The other contacts we have in there are usual: dogs, glass. As you can see, glass was way down. Dogs, very popular in the off season. People like to bring their dogs here that are winter visitors. Bonfires, not many bonfires to speak of. Vendors, vendors are doing a pretty decent job with how they conduct themselves on the beach. We're still experiencing some ghost set issues at some public beaches, but that's really a function of the code and not a function of enforcement or vendor activity. It's their operational, daily operational setup. They put them up in the morning. Their visitor may or may, or their client may or may not come down to the beach. So we'll suffer through that as we can. Code revisions that we took on. So that's our efforts on proactive and reactive on private property and public property. Same as it has been. We have a tough time getting to private property with our code enforcement people since we're not traversing the beach right now. I am demoing a handheld unit that will help us solve one problem. So one problem we have is we have to be connected to the internet to be able to research our database. One of the main tenets of code enforcement is we have to know if we've encountered the person or not prior to this encounter. So I'm researching a handheld unit that will get us out of our trucks and get us walking down the beach. That will more than likely mean an increase in code enforcement officers. That'll be for future discussion. But it'll be its own, has its own database, has a printer attached to it, has the ability to swipe a driver's license and import all that information from it. And so I think it's going to be a good product. It's about $22,000 a year for a 3-year contract for the initial setup and then the rental of the unit and maintenance on the unit. But I'll bring more of that back to you. I just got it in my hands. We haven't really done a whole lot with it, but at our next meeting we'll have a better update on it. Code revisions. Sorry, I'm having a hard time seeing. Reading the trays. Code revisions. So February 28th, BCC made several code revisions to the beach-related codes. Dogs on the beach, we changed the time to be universal instead of having it separate for daylight savings time and regular time. Vendor equipment storage, some big changes. All equipment has to be in boxes now, and we changed the distance apart from 10 feet to 20 feet. And the biggest one was we're starting a pilot program for a managed vendor program, and that'll be at Inlet Beach and at Ed Walleen Beach. It's in a co-op form where we've entered into a master agreement with entity known as South Walton Beach Service Association. So it's an industry association that's been put together by members of that industry. But there is a mechanism to allow people that are not members of the vendors that are not members of the industry to still participate in the managed vendor program, very similar to a subcontract agreement. And that's where the co-op comes in. Looks like it's going to work real well. We start that on April 7th. I've been in close contact with the South Walton Beach Service Association people that are administrating this, and so I'll report back as we go through it. But I think it's the answer to some of the problems we have on the beach, and we're going to work hard to make sure that it is successful, and hopefully migrate it to other regional beach accesses next year, and quite possibly some of the public beaches at neighborhood beach accesses. And Grayton Beach might be a good candidate for it as well. Employees, we have done interviews or completed interviews for our new beach code enforcement manager. We're having a second round with 2 candidates on the 3rd of this month. We have interviews for a new beach code enforcement officer on the 11th, and then also for 4 new beach ambassadors that were approved at the as part of this managed vendor program. We have interviews on the 11th for them. We hope to be able to get some good candidates and get them started and trained and all working. The training in our beach code enforcement officers, we've all been to the annual shorebird and marine turtle training that we do every year. And we have some of our officers continuing on with their Florida Association of Code Enforcement training. That's updates on beach operations activity. We do have 1 new employee in beach maintenance. A guy named Paul Hinton has joined us as our maintenance tech crew leader. It was a much needed position, so he is the guy that will coordinate all of our maintenance techs, do our carpentry, painting, miscellaneous electrical, plumbing, mechanical repairs to all of our facilities. So,
Any comments from the council?
Brian, just one thing that kind of stuck out, your year-over-year garbage, it was even with last year, but yet you're only getting the 60% of the private properties.
Yes, sir.
So I imagine maybe as we get into season, you'll start to see
A little bit, yeah.
a disparity between the two
What we have
years.
found is that we've had to increase our garbage collection to actual bags at our public beach accesses where we took out. So we're still able to get, when I say, to areas, the biggest area we can't get to is in between Western Lake and Eastern Lake. But we have a large frequency of public beach accesses there. So what we've seen is an increase in garbage at those public beach accesses.
Oh.
So the people that were putting garbage at private beach accesses in close proximity to those public beach accesses are now hauling their garbage over to our public beach access. And so, in a way, we're still getting garbage off the beach. It's just not as convenient for the beachgoer to carry garbage to a garbage collection station.
Got it.
And in some cases, we believe that it's probably people that work with the different resort communities are making an extra effort to get garbage that used to be collected at their beach access boardwalks over to our public ones.
Okay.
So we've accommodated it by adding more bags.
Yeah.
Because, as we see bags, that's how we do it. If a bag station starts to overflow, we just add another, what we call our rings, our stainless steel rings that hold the paper bags. We just add more of those. We have what we call 2-baggers and 4-baggers. And we add them and take them out as necessary.
Okay.
So, but I appreciate you noticing that.
Sure.
Thank you, Brian.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
All right, I'm back to wrap things up. So, while the others were doing their director's report, I did look at the electronic version of this map, and so I found out a few details which we could not see in that little bitty tiny print. When I blew it up, I could see it. So, to answer your question, Tom, the lot is 281.5 feet wide that fronts 98. And the yellow portion that's colored is not the entire lot, that's half of it. Those are power lines that are running across, but the lot goes all the way to that solid line running along 98. So it's almost double what's shown on your little map there. So I just thought I'd clarify that for you. So the challenge may be building a building with those power lines there, because we can't build a building under those power lines. We can put a parking lot, but not a building. So we'll explore all that, and we'll bring it back to you once we do. So, Lisa, can you move forward one slide? So just a couple updates from me. Roundtable meetings, we have had several meetings now. One with our accommodation partners, that went really well. We had another one with our restaurant partners. And then we have one coming up later this month for our attractions. So these meetings have been really good, I think, for both our partners and for TDC staff. We've had some really good, meaningful conversations on how we can work together, what we can do to help our partners. And so I've really enjoyed having them, and from the feedback that I've received from our partners, they have as well. So I think so far they've been very successful, and I'll keep you updated as we move along. Like I said, we have one with our attraction folks in just a couple of weeks.
Jay,
Yes, sir?
I'm not interrupting you, but that's something we've talked about for a long time prior to this council, and I think even 2 years before, is to reestablish a deteriorating relationship between the bed tax collectors and the TDC, and to hear you say that these have been real fruitful is very, very encouraging.
Well, in addition to those efforts of having these roundtable meetings, Lisa Foster, who is now doing our industry relations, she goes out and meets with all of our partners regularly, and she does these reports, and she sends them back to me, and she sends them back to David. She's in David's department, and they're really great reports. I mean, the information that she gives and the information that our partners are looking for and how we can help them, it's really great having a dedicated staff member to be able to go out and talk to our partners and see what we can do to help them. I mean, that's what the TDC is here for. I mean, we're here to serve our community, and that's both the residents and the locals who work in the tourism industry.
That's very encouraging to hear.
Well, thank you. Real quick, wanted to give an update on Sports Park, and we have not talked about this. I think we chatted a little bit about it in the strategic planning session, but we had an opportunity. I had a developer approach me and a few commissioners as well about the possibility of having a sports park over in Miramar Beach on the western side. right by the county line. Can you move forward one? So this is the Golf Garden property that's in Miramar Beach. It's been for sale for a while now. And so we were approached by a developer to say, hey, are you interested in this from a sports park? See if you're interested in for a sports park. And so they have two things. It's under contract. So the developer approached me, actually has it under contract. And we talked a little bit about this at the BCC meeting last week, and I'll kind of fill you in the details of that in just a second. So what the developer's proposing is they are looking at 10 acres of commercial across the front. And then the 25 acres that are, it's 35 acres, and the 25 acres that are in the back, they are looking at some different options. One is houses, apartments, and then they came to the county and said, hey, are you interested in this from a sports park standpoint? And so had some conversations with the commissioners, and initially there was some interest there. We ordered some appraisals. Those are currently being done, and I'll bring those back to the board once we have that done. We talked about doing a feasibility study at the last board meeting, and the board decided until they had the appraisals back, they wanted to hold off on the feasibility study. So they said no to the feasibility study at the last meeting. So we'll wait until we get those appraisals back, and I'll bring it back to the board, and I'll see what they want to do, kind of next steps. So that's kind of where we are with the sports park. We'll see. They had some conversations with the commissioners also about the spray fields, because we were kind of concerned this might not be big enough. The spray fields, which are owned by South Walton Utilities, they're actually talking to another entity right now about possibly doing something on that site. So until that's either a yay or a nay, we're not really talking to the utility company about that as a possible site. And when I spoke to Alicia, the general manager, she said they should know something within the next 30 to 45 days, and that's about 2 weeks ago. So they should know something sooner if they're going to do anything with that site. So we'll kind of see how all this plays out with them, with their, whoever they're partnering with, and then also on this site when we get the appraisals back. So I'll keep you informed as we move forward, but just kind of wanted to do an update on that. So this is 30A and Hilltop. So this is Jim Richard's property that is across the street from our new beach access and adjacent to Stinky's. And you can kind of see there, one property is highlighted, but we're talking actually about two pieces of property. So that's one, and then the other one is just south of there between that property and 30A. So the board had appraisals done on that. We got those back, and now we are in talks with Jim Richard to bring back a contract to the board. And so wanted to be transparent here because there's always talk in the community how things are not transparent, and I like to think that I am very transparent. So what we're proposing on this site is to help alleviate some of the traffic and congestion for the neighbors getting into their community. I'll just step away from the podium for a second. On the back side of the community, you can kind of see where Stinky's is. Woodward Road goes up, and there's a whole development back there called Serenity at Dune Allen. And so we're trying to help those folks who live back there with their congestion getting through Stinky's and 30A. So what we're proposing is a few things. One, in order to make this happen, there has to be, the owner, Jim Richard, is asking for an abandonment of that easement at Woodward. And so what we do is, to counter that, we would create a road in between Hilltop and Woodward that then would give those folks access. So that would help alleviate some of that congestion that's adjacent to Stinky's at Woodward. So that's one thing. The other is that, so we do the abandonment, and then we do the road, and then the other is it would have to be, the property would have to be rezoned as a right-of-way. And the reason why that is because of the Coastal Dune Lake Protection Zone. So that's kind of where we are right now. Jim Richard has agreed to the average appraised value, which is $2,075,000, and he has asked, he's agreed to owner financing for a 3-year term with a 60-40, so 60% down and 40% finance. So just kind of wanted to give you an update on this property and where we are. We need to prepare a contract and bring that back to the board, which we won't have done for the next board meeting. So we hope to have this back to the board the next few weeks, and then they'll decide. It did come out at the meeting, since we brought this forward to the board, that some of the homeowners are not happy with the realignment of that road. And so I'm sure there'll be some further conversation at the next board meeting, or the next board meeting when this is brought to the board. So just wanted to give you an update of where we are on this project.
How many parking spaces for that, Josh?
Good question, Tim. So right now, let me check my notes. We were looking at 20 to 25 spaces on that spot. And the property is 0.526 acres. That's combined, those two parcels.
What was the cost on it?
The cost is $2,075,000. Welcome to South Walton.
$100,000 of car space.
So that's that property. And then can we go to the next one? So this is 393. We just closed on this property about 3 weeks ago. It is 2.3 acres, and it is about 1,000 feet north of Ed Walleen. So this parking can greatly benefit beach parking as well as parking for the neighboring businesses in that community. So real quick, I just want to be clear about something with parking. You hear a lot of people saying, well, we don't need to give parking to this business or that business. And, we have a parking problem in South Walton. And so parking needs to be a benefit to the community. So if that happens to serve a particular business or two or three, or in that area over 30, then that's a benefit to the community. It's getting traffic and congestion off the roads, off the right-of-ways. It's making things safer that people are parking in a parking lot versus the right-of-ways. So, I'm just not sure these people who say, well, we shouldn't give parking to XYZ business. We need to give parking to the public so they can go and park at places. That's what we need to do. So, and the board seems in agreement with that. I mean, I bought them now quite a few parking projects, and we've made quite a few acquisitions in the past few years. And so I think the board's doing a very good job at beach access and parking acquisitions. And so that property was $3.7 million. It was the average appraised value the owners agreed to. And again, it was 2.3 acres. And if memory serves me correctly, I think we can put 150 cars on a surface lot. And this property is big enough in the future. If we wanted to put a parking garage, we could. So if we wanted to create some type of a parking system where we have shuttles where people are parking in the garage there and we're funneling people elsewhere on 30A, we certainly have that as an option in the future.
How far north of 38 is that?
It's 1,000 feet from Ed Walleen.
I can't, with all the yellow lines, I can't figure out which one. Is it the square on the right side of 393?
It is the one that's red.
Oh, the red.
Yeah.
The red. I see it now. Yeah.
Rectangle?
Yep.
In the middle of the
My color blindness got in the way there.
So it's the large parcel that's right off of 393, kind of in the middle of that TV screen. Let's see what else. I wanted to kind of update you on properties. So I talked about the sports park, 393, Dune Allen. I think that's it for properties. And I am in conversations with a few folks right now about some other properties, and I have Chance Powell looking at it from a parking perspective, and depending on how that goes, I may be bringing that back to the board in the next meeting or two. I'm just waiting to hear from Chance Powell back on that. Chance is the traffic engineer for Walton County, for those of you who may not know Chance. I think most of y'all do. So there may be some more options being presented to the board shortly for parking. Real quick, just wanted to give you an update on the annual meeting. Tourism Week's coming up. It is the first week of May. So that week we have lots of festivities planned. We'll have our annual meeting on Monday, May 6th at the Hilton at Sandestin at 11:30. All of you guys are invited, of course. Then the next day we have some workshops for our partners. And so these are educational workshops. So we have 2 planned in the morning and then 1 in the afternoon. And that is on May 7th, starting at 8:30. The second session is at 10, and the third session later that afternoon at 2 o'clock. And so we're also sponsoring the Chamber Luncheon on May 8th, and at that luncheon we'll be presenting our strategic plan to the public at that luncheon. So, and that's going to be at Baytown Conference Center at 2 o'clock. So, it'd be great to get out and see our partners and interact with them during Tourism Week, and certainly y'all are invited to help us with those festivities. And we'll be having, the visitor center will be open. We'll be having refreshments there, bringing people in and giving them little gifts as well for Tourism Week, just to kind of help promote Tourism Week. So, quick thing on annual report. Annual report is done and is going to the printer this week, so we hope to have those in the next couple of weeks, and we'll be sending those out once we get those printed. And we'll also be doing a newspaper insert to go along with the annual report. So what we'll do is take key information out of the annual report, put that in the newspaper, push it out socially, and then we'll be also distributing the annual report. So we feel it's really important to get this information out to the public so they realize the value of the TDC and what we do for our community. And with that said, that's all for me. Any questions?
Yeah, just quickly, at our last meeting, we were submitting something to the state on the high impact. Have we heard anything back on it?
We have not heard back from that. Actually, I was talking to Clay during the meeting, one of our little sidebar conversations, and he has reached out to somebody that he knows there just to see if he can get some information for us. But I'm also going to reach out to Sydney Noyes, the county attorney, because she had a conversation early on with someone. I'm not sure who that person was, but I'm trying to get a contact name that I can reach out to specifically to somebody at DOR and say, hey, what's the status of this?
Yeah, you think after 2 months you'd get some kind of reply.
Actually, it's been a little longer than that. It's been, I think, going on close to 4 months at this
4
point.
months.
They told us they have something by the end of February.
Yeah.
And we're already late.
Right. So we're working on that.
That's my reason for bringing it up.
Yeah, so we haven't got a response back from them, but and we're looking to see who we can get in contact with them. And one last thing, and this is something that I just want to kind of give some kudos to the team at the TDC. We were recognized, Southeast Tourism Society has their Shining Example Awards, and 2 weeks ago I went to Daytona Beach where they have their annual conference, and we received a Shining Example Award for Tourism Office of the Year. And so I just want to tell the team, thank you so much for all they do for South Walton, for Walton County. It's nice to be recognized by your peers in the tourism industry. And I did tell the board at the last meeting, I let them know that we won that award. And it's just nice. And the award goes, part of what we submitted it on was not just the work at a TDC from a marketing standpoint, but also what we're doing here from a destination standpoint. Talking about, like we were talking about earlier in this meeting, but parking and traffic and congestion, buying property for beach access. We put all that in to our nomination for this award. And so it's nice to be recognized for our efforts because I think what we're doing is truly beginning to make a difference. You know, we have our new beach access over in Dune Allen. You heard Brian talking about that earlier. That'll be coming online midsummer. And that's exciting. I mean, that's the first beach access in Walton County in over 10 years. So that really is phenomenal that we have that, and we'll have 2 more following in the next 12 to 18 months. All these new parking areas that we're buying, always on the hunt for more. I mean, this is going to shape the future of Walton County, and it's exciting to be a part of that.
Congratulations.
Thank you. That's it for me. Unless there's any questions by any council members, I'm happy to entertain any.
We're so good, we don't have any questions.
Great. I know everybody wants to go to lunch.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Well done. Good job.
Any comments from any of the council members? Seeing none, any comments from the public? Seeing none, need a motion to adjourn.
Still motion.
Second.
A motion and a second. All in favor of adjourning, say aye.
Aye.
Adjourned.